All right, everyone. Welcome to this dumb week. It has been an exceptionally dumb week. Alex, would you agree with my assessment of the quality of dumb of this week?
Yes. No, it's totally been a pretty dumb week. Though for me, it was pretty great. Coming and that should be taken into account into the context of a tough market. What a tough market is to stand out as a dumb week.
But we have a great little lineup of stupid here. The first thing that we will be discussing is a lawsuit between Laura Loomer and Bill Maher, which had a deposition that came out this week that was rather spectacular, that I have recreated for everyone in a dramatic fashion so that we can enjoy the deposition of Laura Loomer in her lawsuit against Bill Maher. So if you might remember, during the presidential campaign, Laura Loomer was seen traveling with Donald Trump on his presidential jet. And on September 13th, 2024 at 9:34 a.m., I tweeted, "The important thing to remember about these dumb times is that dumb is combinatorially explosive. As the number of dumb things increases, the number of dumb combinations and dumb permutations becomes incalculable. Trump having an affair with Laura Loomer is not impossible." And then later that night, Bill Maher sort of stole my idea on Real Time.
Here's my question, because Laura Loomer said, Taylor Swift, she believes, is in an arranged relationship with Travis Kelce to influence the 2024 election. I think maybe Laura Loomer's in an arranged relationship to affect the election because she's very close to Trump. She's 31, looks like his type. We did an editorial here a few years ago. You're remembering it already. It was basically, who's Trump fucking? Because I said, it's not nobody. He's been a dog for too long, and it's not Melania. I think we may have our answer this week. I think it might be Laura Loomer. I'm just saying.
So the next day, Ms. Loomer tweeted out, "I should sue Bill Maher for defamation. This is beyond the pale, and it's a complete and blatant lie. I have never in my life seen such a coordinated attack by the mainstream media. The White House and leftist personalities target a private citizen and investigative journalist simply because I flew on a plane and I support Donald Trump. This is unacceptable. It's a full-blown lie and incredibly disrespectful to President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. It's very obvious some type of memo went out because the reaction to what I said is completely overblown, and it's a full-blown character assassination campaign. This is a full-blown lie from Bill Maher, and he is maliciously and deliberately defaming me." Now, at the time, Laura Loomer's fans were like, "You go, girl. You should sue him. You have every right to sue him for defamation." And I pointed out several things at the time that would cause some difficulty in Laura Loomer's hypothetical lawsuit. And one is that Bill Maher didn't make a statement of fact, which is fairly important in a defamation lawsuit in a general sense, and increasingly important in a situation where you're talking about popular figures, public figures, as they say. This is two. Bill Maher's statement wouldn't pass the actual malice threshold, which requires Maher to have known for certain that what he was saying wasn't true. So when you make a statement of fact and it is false, you could be liable for defamation if the person you're talking about is not a public figure because you have done damage to them and the false claim that you have made has caused them harm. But when you're talking about a public figure, there's this threshold of actual malice, which doesn't necessarily mean that you had the intent to cause them harm, but it means that there is evidence that you knew what you were saying was false, which is just slightly different than saying something that is false. But you knew it was false at the time that you said it, and you basically didn't care. You were going to say it anyway to harm the individual. And the third point that I made was that even if those two hurdles were somehow met, which I wouldn't expect them to be, she still would need to actually show, after they said, yes, she was defamed, that there were damages that she incurred and that she had some sort of reputation that this sort of statement might actually cause harm to, which I said is sort of a preposterous scenario. Alex, are you with us? I see that you are now joined as co-host. Now he's back as listener. Okay. So despite the hurdles that I listed, on October 22nd, 2024, she actually did file suit against Bill Maher and has been pending movement on that ever since. But this week, a deposition that Ms. Loomer gave in that lawsuit was released. And I'm going to play a recreated dramatization of an exchange in that deposition so that you can all enjoy the wonderful, important conversations that occurred in that deposition.
Ms. Loomer, can I ask you to look at the next exhibit?
Yeah, but I'm just putting it into context. So,
I'm not interested in your speech. Exhibit 30.
She was upset. She was jealous.
Exhibit 30 is your response to her. Can you read that out loud to me?
Hey, Marjorie, remember when you destroyed your family so you could have sex with a Zangief cosplayer? Tell me again how you and the Arbys in your pants are representatives of the GOP. You couldn't even run your own family. Don't tell me how to run my free speech.
Okay. So when you...
But you're not showing the screenshot. It's like intentionally blurred out. I don't know why you blurred it out, but it showed a document where somebody who she had an affair with showed text messages of her having an affair, and it was well documented. It was in text messages, and it's the reason why she ended up getting divorced from her husband, Perry, who I know. At the time, during my campaign, they were married. And they came to my event. And it's well known, and she's even admitted to it, that they got divorced because of her marital infidelity.
Right. Can you explain to me what it means?
But I don't understand why you blurred it out. It's blurred out.
Can you explain?
Objection. Relevancy.
Can you explain to me what it means to say to her, the Arby's in her pants?
Well, Arby's.
Objection. Relevancy.
Answer the question.
Arby's sells roast beef.
Right. Can you tell me why you were talking about the Arby's in her pants?
Well, it's just an expression.
What is the expression trying to convey?
It conveys the reason why she got a divorce by her own admission.
Because she had roast beef in her pants?
Yeah.
She'd put roast beef in her pants. That's what you're trying to say there? You're literally saying she put Arby's in her pants?
I'm saying she literally... It's so ridiculous. I'm saying she literally put Arby's in her pants. Yes.
You're not making a slur about her? You're literally saying she put an Arby's sandwich in her pants. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Why are you laughing?
Because I just think it's so funny.
What is your basis for saying she put Arby's in her pants?
I just think it's so funny.
What is your basis for saying she put Arby's in her pants?
She carries roast beef in her pockets.
What is your basis for saying she puts roast beef in her pockets and in her pants?
Because I know she likes roast beef.
So what is your basis for saying she had Arby's in her pants?
Because I know she likes to eat at Arby's.
And she likes to put it in her pants. You know that?
Yeah.
She puts Arby's in her pants?
Yeah, she does.
Okay. If I ask Marjorie Taylor Greene, she would tell you that she puts Arby's in her pants?
It's my best belief that she would tell you that. Yes.
Okay. Are you making a derogatory comment about her sex life by talking about Arby's in her pants?
No, I'm talking about Arby's, the sandwiches. I'm talking about Arby's. I'm a very direct person. If I was making a derogatory comment, I would have said it. I just think it's so funny because I feel like you would understand it if you actually hadn't blurred the photo, but it's blurred.
Lindsey Graham also called you toxic around the time that you were at the debate, right?
Yeah.
So that was a recreation of the exchange that was in Ms. Loomer's deposition. And as you can see, Donald Trump has nothing but the highest caliber advisors surrounding him at all times. Everyone is making sure to be of tip-top quality and of upstanding decorum at all times. And hopefully Alex can come back because we have the everlasting and evergreen subject matter to cover next, which has been exploding this week in new ways, which I will introduce thusly.
Miss Sullivan.
No, you first, please.
No, you.
I just wanted to tell you that
Yeah.
I found the Epstein file.
Good, good. I was just going to ask you about the Epstein file.
Were you really?
This is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that doesn't end.
Newsweek, Donald Trump blowing Bubba message in Epstein emails under scrutiny. An email in the Jeffrey Epstein files that reference U.S. President Donald Trump blowing Bubba has attracted scrutiny on social media. On Wednesday, U.S. lawmakers released more than 20,000 pages of documents connected to Epstein, a convicted sex offender who died by suicide in a New York jail in 2019 while awaiting sex trafficking charges. Some of the documents mention Trump, including one from Epstein's brother Mark, which references photos of Trump blowing Bubba. Bubba is a nickname of former President Bill Clinton, but Mark Epstein told Newsweek the individual is not Clinton. He did not provide any additional details about the identity of Bubba or the meaning of the emails. Newsweek reached out to the White House by email to comment on the story outside of normal business hours. Files related to Epstein continue to cause problems for the Trump administration as bipartisan groups have called for greater transparency in the case and further publication of documents and evidence in the government's possession. Trump has consistently denied any wrongdoing in connection with Epstein and has said their friendship ended in the early 2000s, but recent release of thousands of documents has brought fresh scrutiny to the president's relationship with Epstein. In an email sent March 2018, Mark Epstein told Jeffrey Epstein to ask Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, if Russian President Vladimir Putin has, quote, the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. Quote, you and your boy Donnie can make a remake of the movie Get Hard, Mark Epstein wrote. Newsweek also reached out to Bannon and the Kremlin by email to comment on this story outside of normal business hours. Posts on social media about the email have gone viral, with people questioning what the email means. One user wrote, who is Bubba and why did Trump blow him? Call to Activism, an account with over 1.1 million followers, wrote, what the fuck? In one of the leaked emails, Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, suggests to ask Steve Bannon if Putin has the photo of Trump blowing Bubba, to which Epstein replied, and I thought I had Suris, which is Yiddish for troubles. Trump is also referenced in other documents, including in emails between Epstein and his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, in which Epstein called Trump, quote, the dog that didn't bark. In an email to author Michael Wolff, Epstein and Trump, quote, knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee later released additional emails said to show Epstein's correspondence with former Trump advisor Steve Bannon and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. Alex, are you back with us now?
Am I? I don't know.
Yes,
tell me.
Yes, you are. Wonderful.
Excellent.
Now, before we continue talking about the everlasting Epstein information here, did you catch our Laura Loomer deposition?
Unfortunately not. You'll have to catch me up on it.
Okay, I'll catch you up in a little bit here, sir. Okay, so now we have this trove of Jeffrey Epstein emails, and I don't know about you, Alex, but I know that I trust an ephebophile, hebephile, or pedophile the most when they are currently under investigation by the federal government and they are slandering the man in charge of, ultimately in charge of investigating them. I know that I trust the words that they say in email the most when that is the situation they are in. I don't know about you.
I mean, it's not exactly like he's just putting out random statements for effect, though.
Well, now when you are talking to your brother and you are effectively just shooting the shit and saying derogatory things, I don't know how much credence you give
it still has to make sense.
Content.
It still has to add up. I mean, I don't. It is a very strange thing to say, but it's not like he was expecting to get any benefit from that.
Well, yeah. Does that sound like a conversation where there was benefit to begin with?
I don't know. I don't understand the conversation, so I can't tell you. Look, I'll give you an example, right? I went deeper into one of the emails with Catherine. Oh, what's her name? Obama's
Catherine Roomler.
Roomler, yes. Right, and everybody was like, there you go, Obama is the boss, and blah 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 blah, right? So I put it in my favorite artificial intelligence, and first of all, it turns out that Roomler had resigned the White House at the time that she was writing this email. You could say fine, he could still be the boss, notionally, fine, but also he might not be. But then again, if you actually read the email very, very carefully, right? It says, have you told the boss? And she says, well, I need to be ready to say yes before I have a conversation with the boss or something. Okay, now, does that mean that the boss is making an offer, or does that mean that she has another offer and she's leaving the boss? Right, because
let me bring in context from Washington Post with Catherine Roomler. Catherine Roomler, President Barack Obama's White House counsel, comes up repeatedly in Epstein's messages, including in messages where Roomler mused about whether she should try to become Attorney General. Roomler is now Chief Legal Officer for Goldman Sachs. Many exchanges with Roomler, who had a professional relationship with Epstein when she worked at Latham & Watkins LLP, focused on Trump. After Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to campaign finance crimes, Epstein wrote Roomler, quote, "You see, I know how dirty Donald is. My guess is that lawyers NY biz people have no idea what it means to have your fixer flip." In an email exchange in September 14, days before then Attorney General Eric Holder stepped down from his position, Roomler appeared to be weighing whether she should replace him at the Justice Department. At the time, she was widely reported to be a contender for the role. Epstein urged Roomler to, quote, "talk to boss," which is what you were sort of mentioning before, to which Roomler said, "Agreed, but I need to be prepared to say yes before I talk to him. It's unclear who boss refers to." Correspondence between Epstein and Roomler. Then Epstein then tells Roomler, who had recently started working at a new job at a private firm, that the decision comes down to the level of, quote, "professional, emotional, and financial risk reward." Quote, "Most girls do not have to worry about this crap," Roomler replies. Epstein then jokes, quote, "girls," and says, quote, "careful, I will renew an old habit." In the same message, he then lists names of influential people he has a meeting with in that week in New York as the United Nations General Assembly took place. He adds, quote, "You are a welcome guest at any." Okay, now does that provide enough context, Alex, for what you were saying to add the clarity?
Sort of. Yes and no, because they're saying that this was in regards to her rejoining effectively the administration as Attorney General, but then they're saying that they don't know who boss is. So how do we know that this was in regard to that? But I mean, maybe they do. It's not made clear in this. But so what I was trying to get at is, if you actually read the conversation carefully, you will notice that Epstein is trying to box her in, right? He's like, talk to boss, whoever boss is, right? He's trying to close the deal, and she's like, "I'm not sure yet." Right? Like, don't push me, effectively. Right? All this is done in very sort of, warm tone, but like the subtext there is, if you think of the, what each person is trying to say, is, that's effectively what comes through. And then she's like, oh, she makes like some cutesy comment to sort of deflect, most girls don't have to worry about this stuff or whatever. And then he's like, oh, you're not like most girls, right? So he, I could introduce you to all these people. And then he lists out, from Gates to Thiel to, like Boris to, I guess that Boris, Boris Johnson, though it could be something else because it says Boris parenthesis Gates, so it may be somebody with the Gates Foundation, to like a whole bunch of world leaders, right? So, if you actually like sit down and read it carefully and think through the words you're reading, this is Epstein buttering her up for something and trying to push her into a commitment that she is trying to deflect from and sort of, think through whatever is. I don't know what that is, right? But people read that and they're like, Obama is the boss and whatever. It's like, okay, but I mean, that doesn't connect Obama to Epstein in any way. Like, Sure.
So is that what you were getting? Because I mean, the the excerpt I read from Washington Post doesn't necessarily suggest that reading of it. So are you talking about other people's readings that you're seeing out there?
That's my reading. I'm telling you about my reading engaging with the actual item itself. Not
no, but in opposition to other people, like in reaction, like this caused you to read the email and you came to a different this interpretation here in opposition to what others were interpreting it around you.
Honestly, I hadn't seen the wider reporting that you just read, which is okay. is useful, and I'd like to understand why they're saying that this has to do with the AG position, which I also picked up that it was in play, but I didn't know that this was related to that. They say that it is. I would like to understand why. All I'm saying is that people read that conversation and saying, like, oh, Obama is involved. And for all I know, he might be, okay? I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying, like, that email doesn't tell you that. So I'm not somebody who's like going to take any sort of accusation like willy-nilly, but at the same time, there has to be an internal logic, right? Like, what are the odds that there is like some gay sex photo of Trump floating around? Extremely low for me. Like, I don't know. I'll be shocked. Okay. I'm not saying that. Like, but at the same time, whatever the explanation for that sequence of messages is, it has to hold up. That's all I'm saying.
So did you read that specific email, the blowing Bubba one, to find a different sort of interpretation?
I think that blew up yesterday, and I was
as it's being sort of spread. This was I didn't spend an extraordinary amount of time with all of these emails. It's not like I heard they came out and I spent an evening or anything poring over them. But that conversation with his brother, where they're talking about that, does not strike me as being too out of the ordinary of just two people who are saying derogatory things about someone who's currently their adversary in some way, right? Like, making sexual untoward comments about them does not seem out of the ordinary to need any deeper explanation. Sure. Right. Like the general narrative at the time that they were writing this email together was that, Trump was Putin's puppet. There was already the P-tape sort of allegation, going out there. So they were, making another, possible one, because there was a long time in the past where Trump was actually someone who donated large amounts of money to the Clintons and cozied up to the Clintons and was sort of friendly with them. So those two things together is as saying that Trump performed fellatio on the former president.
Well, that would be fine as a metaphor, but usually metaphors are not caught on camera, right? The fact that they're talking about a photo is weird. Anyway.
Well, I mean, just combining narratives out in the ether. Right.
Right. Yes. And it really should tell you actually how hard it is to interpret things, especially ones that are said in private. And I think we probably should be a lot more careful in interpreting them. Not that we shouldn't take them into account, but there's just a lot of things that are happening when people communicate, and many of those are, especially when you communicate with your familiars, many of them are unsaid, right? You're referring to things that they know and or talking in ways that they understand and you understand, and nobody needs to explain anything because that's how it works.
Right. There's an inner context, and sometimes even using words that have outside interpretations that lead you to have a completely different conclusion about what's being discussed.
Yeah. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible to look, there's a hard version of this position, which is like, it's impenetrable and you should give up and you should never even try. And I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is, a lot of these things require a lot of care and attention to detail, which we're clearly not exhibiting.
Well, some of the Michael Wolff stuff seems to only have sort of one interpretation, where he's like, hey, if you have this stuff against Trump, you could totally blackmail him with it.
I mean, oh my God. So that is something, right? Because Wolff supposedly was being put up even by people, I kind of like sometimes as this sort of, daring reporter, committed to the truth or something. And it was always a mystery how he found himself, in the White House, just sitting there and writing a book for weeks or months. Or
one of the things that happened early on in the first Trump administration was that Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner sort of operated mutually contradictory propaganda campaigns from the White House, where they themselves were the anonymous source to a load of news stories. And they were sort of at times operating in tandem, but a lot of times operating in opposition to one another, because Steve Bannon didn't particularly like Jared Kushner. But a lot of the things that Michael Wolff was sort of procuring actually came from like Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon does not necessarily just tell the truth when he's giving these types of candid things. So Michael Wolff was basically just taking people's words and accumulating them, and occasionally saying they were.
Here, he is showing a lot of, being self-conscious about what information can do. Right. This isn't somebody who is like writing a tell-all and like, I have no further interest in this. That's what I'm saying. Right. Yeah. So Michael Wolff, 72, is an American journalist. Not only a terrible source, but Wolff is a terrible messenger. This is from the BBC Epstein files. Who else is mentioned? There's several outlets who did individual subcategories of the people mentioned. So Michael Wolff, 72, is an American journalist and columnist, as well as a prolific author of books on the wealthy and the famous. Fire and Fury, the first of several books spanning Trump's first stint as U.S. president, which we were just alluding to, Alex, came out in 2018 with descriptions of a dysfunctional White House and salacious details about the U.S. commander-in-chief. Trump said it was full of lies. The new batch of files related to Jeffrey Epstein shed light on a relationship that appears to indicate a correspondence between Wolff and the late convicted sex offender. Attention has focused particularly on one of the emails in which Wolff appears to give Epstein advice in relation to Trump as Trump was campaigning for the White House for the first time. Wolff wrote to Epstein in 2015 to notify him that CNN was planning to ask Trump as a presidential candidate about his relationship with Epstein. Epstein replied, "If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?" The two go on to discuss a strategy, with Wolff writing, I think you should let him hang himself. In a separate email from October 2016, days before the U.S. presidential election, Wolff offers Epstein a chance to sit for an interview that could finish Trump. Responding to the release in a video posted on Instagram, Wolff said, "Some of those emails are between Epstein and me, with Epstein discussing his relationship with Donald Trump. I have been trying to talk about this story for a long time now," he added. In fact, Wolff disclosed before the latest presidential election in the U.S. that he had interviewed Epstein periodically for Fire and Fury and released tapes of those conversations. The documents included correspondence between Epstein and Larry Summers, who was former Democratic President Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary. It had been previously reported that the two men knew each other. The emails indicate that the two met for dinner frequently, with Epstein often trying to connect Summers to prominent global figures. At one point in July 2018, Epstein proposed a meeting with the president of United Nations. Interesting person for you. In a separate email, late November 2016, just after Trump's election, Summers asked Epstein to spend zero effort on anything about me with Trump. Due to Trump's approach to conflict of interest, Putin's proximity and mindless response to Cuban leader Fidel Castro's death, Summers has said he was best off a million miles away. A spokesperson for Summers declined to comment, but referred to the BBC to past statements by Summers. A representative told the Wall Street Journal in 2023 that the former official, quote, deeply regrets being in contact with Epstein after his conviction. So there's the way the BBC summarized it. Although they left out some of the parts that I mentioned more casually when we were discussing that just a moment ago, Alex, which is where Michael Wolff was, talking about how they could use the information as leverage. And here we go. This is from WAPO. They have it here. Quote, "If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house," this is Michael Wolff,
then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. So this is author Michael Wolff giving Jeffrey Epstein advice on how to politically weaponize information he may or may not have as Donald Trump was running for president. So Alex, that was the particular quote I was looking for too. Yep.
By the way, I have so yes, Michael Wolff is trash, and I'm actually interested in how it appears that Epstein's brother was also in on the business, because as far as I understood, I mean, I haven't looked too deep into this, but he gave an interview to Tucker, and I think the framing was, that his brother was like a civilian or something, not like in the game, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But this is interesting in that regard. Maybe Tucker can ask some follow-ups. The other thing I wanted to tell you, this is going to cross over multiple of our interesting topics. Do you know what old cabinet members do when they leave the cabinet?
They usually go on to sit on boards and do press boards, speech,
right.
speeches.
So, do you know the boards that Larry Summers is on? Do you have any idea of one in particular that is relevant? I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
Traces of AI dystopia.
Is it Palantir?
No, it's OpenAI, actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
He's on the board of OpenAI as a result of that aborted coup that we keep talking about. Because we...
Yes, I do vaguely remember that. Yes. Now that you mention it.
He was placed as one of the 3 people that were, initially announced to be the board members that were going to sort of steer the ship back home. So there's old Larry showing up at the helm of one of the top AI companies for no apparent reason.
Now, there was one name that was sort of unfortunate to appear in here, and that was Peggy Segal. And that's unfortunate only because it's not Katie Segal who played Peggy Bundy on Married with Children, and that could cause confusion in people's. Don't get those people confused. If you're the Peggy Segal is a completely different person than Peg Bundy played by Katie Segal. Just so everyone knows. I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on that, Alex. I don't want anyone getting.
Yeah, no, I was about to make that mistake, except for not knowing any of the people you're talking about.
Okay, all right. Well, we have to get you up to date on modern culture or a couple decades old modern culture so that you can catch my references and understand where I'm going here. But there's two aspects to this, Alex. There is, quote, the truth of so to speak, of the distillation of this corpus of information, all of these emails. And then there is the cultural truth that will be taken as this goes through. And this story, of course, never ends, as the song that I played it to the intro it indicates. And the narratives are already going, and some of this information is being sort of taken at face value and spreading through the interwebs. So I just want to play a little bit of a sprinkling of the larger sort of viral videos that are spreading around of even just what appear to be average people, commenting inside of TikTok or Instagram and things like that on their reactions to this, to sort of get a sense that this dump will probably have a deep sticking point in associating Donald Trump with some of this illicit activity that we all believe Jeffrey Epstein participated in. So the first clip here is from The Daily Show, and then the rest are actual individuals on TikTok and Instagram.
So that's all the news in terms of bombshell emails? It's not a lot. It's not like there's an email with a journalist where he's strategizing how to blackmail Trump.
Michael Wolff says, quote, I hear that CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt.
I Epstein was like, yeah, that seems like a lot of work. I'm probably just going to kill myself. Also, why was Jeffrey Epstein writing about his crimes in emails? That's so dumb. He's firing off his BlackBerry to Ghislaine like, hey, girl, following up about the sex crimes. Hope Trump doesn't snitch about the sex crimes. Hit me up if you want sex crimes this weekend. Say what you want about Donald Trump, but he knows better than to put incriminating shit in emails. He does it in person, or on the phone, or reportedly inside a sketch of a naked lady, but never email.
I need to share with you what I've seen people have found so far regarding the Epstein emails, because they are not even 3 days old as of this recording, and it is insane. Epstein saying, I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body. The Kremlin disguising a $100 million real estate deal with Epstein to manipulate Trump. Epstein talking mortgage fraud regarding Trump's Mar-a-Lago. Epstein repeatedly mocking Trump as well as Alan Dershowitz. Epstein meeting with Trump and Prince Andrew in 2019 during his presidency. Deepak Chopra telling Epstein he felt connected to Woody Allen. Qatar. Epstein suggesting a war council to help Trump with legal problems in New York, making fun of Trump again. Epstein hanging at Trump Tower in 2016. Epstein teaching Russians and Putin specifically how to manipulate Trump. Epstein talking to Peter Thiel. Epstein openly saying Trump was at his house with a victim for hours. Also openly saying that Trump knows about the girls. One of Epstein's clients saying that they don't want to run into Trump at Epstein's house, so they're going to wait outside until he's done. Epstein having Thanksgiving with Trump during his first presidency. New York Times journalist working around Epstein. They had sat on evidence that Epstein tried to offer them regarding Trump. Michael Wolff strategizing with Epstein on how to capitalize on Trump's antics regarding this. Former Secretary of Treasury emailing Epstein like they're buddies, and the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, emailing from Epstein. If this is only days into the release of these tens of thousands of emails, what else is in here, and what are in the files?
I just spoke to Congressman Robert Garcia, who's on the Oversight Committee. That's the group that is releasing all of these Epstein emails. And they are in touch, yes, with Michael Wolff, the author, who is sitting on tons of Epstein tapes and more evidence. And the Epstein estate is still cooperating with them. While they have the emails now, and they do expect to get even more evidence from the Epstein estate, what's coming next could be pictures. And I did ask him, well, does Steve Bannon know if Vladimir Putin has a picture of Trump blowing Bubba? And he uncomfortably laughed and said he doesn't know if that would be in evidence or if that's some kind of like inside joke or like what that is. Okay, it's disturbing, but, let's not forget that Donald Trump once said this about Arnold Palmer, and watch the way he talks about Arnold Palmer. It's like he's fondly remembering something.
But Arnold Palmer was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women, and I love women. But this is a guy that was all man. His man was strong and tough, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God. That's unbelievable. I had to say it.
What were Arnold Palmer's nicknames? Did he ever hang out in Russia?
Trump was blowing Bill Clinton. Putin has the photos. No way. The elites just have worldwide blackmail on each other. That's how they get away with it. There's no way he blew Bill Clinton.
That's really, really hot. That bag, that's hot. Those shoes, that's hot. That's hot. That's hot.
Ask Putin if he has the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. I thought that was fake. I know the emails got released. I know there's so many of them circulating around, but this is one that I thought, oh no, that can't be real. No, it's fucking real. I went to the Oversight Committee website and I clicked the Here button and it opens up into the Google Drive and I found the exact page number and verified. Yes, that is a real fucking email. Republicans, come get your fucking boy, because what the hell do you mean? Putin has photos of Donald Trump doing Gluck Gluck 3000 on whoever the fuck Bubba is. Apparently that might be Bill Clinton. Bubba might be Clinton's nickname, is what I'm hearing, which no fucking surprise here. I'm not surprised. None of us in the Democratic corner are trying to defend Clinton here like you guys are doing to your orange Cheeto master, okay? We say lock them both the fuck up. Can you do the same? Probably not. But this explains so much as to why Donald Trump bends the knee to Putin every single fucking time. Because he has to. If not, photos of I don't know, that's just not good imaging, man. My name is Mercedes Chandler. Give me a follow. I can't believe that's fucking real. But I can at the same time. Or you won't see my face again. Thank you. Goodbye.
The hate for Hillary Clinton makes so much sense now. Donald Trump was jealous because she was with his man.
Look at the date on this email. More people should be talking about this. This is an email between Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011. Okay, 4 years before Donald Trump started running for president. 5 years before anybody had the notion that he could realistically become president. This is not a conversation between two conspirators trying to figure out how to get a pardon, how to exact influence over a future president. This is two conspirators either talking about a third conspirator, talking about a participant / customer, or best case scenario for Trump, talking about somebody who knew of their criminal activity and wasn't doing anything about it. 2011 is when this email happened. That is an important fact.
So I don't know, Alex, what the ultimate conclusion is going to be from all this information, and whether or not we are going to learn anything concrete about the relationship. There's hints somewhere in there where maybe it gives credence to that off chance idea that Trump had, sort of spit out into the ether one day, that he had been sort of a informant or a cooperating witness some way with the FBI at some point, that he just kind of threw out there out of nowhere one day, took everyone off guard. There was some hints that perhaps that was what was going on inside of the email, that said, like, the dog that didn't bark, like, why isn't anybody talking about Trump during this time, about this activity that he was clearly partially aware of, and things like that. And that lends a little bit of credence to that offhand comment that Trump made. I don't know where this is all going to stick, but I do believe on the sort of cultural level, this is not a good week for Trump and his ability to be taken seriously by a large number of people, even some of his former fans who have become very disillusioned with his handling of the Epstein files. I think this sort of stuff might make them believe, or at least lean toward believing, that he had more to hide about Epstein than they would have previously. What's your sense here, Alex?
Look, I think we've talked about this way of thinking in the past, but a lot of people were wondering, why the whole grab them comment didn't, hurt his reputation as much as, other things would hurt Hillary's reputation, like the deplorables comment, a lot more, right? And
Mm-hmm.
People were like, well, this is a lot worse than that. So, why isn't, this hurting his reputation like that is hurting hers? And the thing is that in order to evaluate how something will hurt somebody's reputation or respect or whatever it is that they have from their audience, their fan base, their movement, whatever, you have to understand what the value prop is, right? Mm-hmm. What is Trump pitching, and what is so if Hillary is showing up as a Democratic president, presidential candidate, she's pitching, universalist values and, acceptance, tolerance, whatever. Right. So when she goes out and says, the basket of deplorables, she's revealing that it's none of that. It's just raw political, power. It is elitism. It is, not caring about, half the country effectively, not having any interest in just wanting to put them under your boot. The worst that people could possibly, imagine about her, she goes out and confirms them personally, right? With Trump, like nobody did not think that he was a brute with women. Like that wasn't like, something he was campaigning on his morality or anything.
A week before, I believe it was a week before the election, was the tape of the grab her by the pussy leaked by yeah, but I'm trying to remember the name of the person who he was speaking to on the bus.
Billy Bush.
Ah, yes. Thank you, sir. You are on point.
I don't know why I remember these things, but there you go.
Excellent.
Anyway, long story short, sorry, just to finish the point. This is that for him. This is the deplorables comment for him, right? This is the thing that, he was supposed to do. He you can't,
right.
If you can't, like an entire cult, say what you will, it was built around Trump going after pedophiles. All right.
Whether exactly. Yes. Whether or not there is the degree of truth that people imagined behind the pedophile blackmail conspiracy network thing that exists with the elites, that at least was partially representative of the concept of draining the swamp. Right, which is going after and exposing these things finally.
You'd say if that's not swamp,
and whenever he immediately turned to it's all a hoax. Whenever like all of a sudden,
oh my god, man, oh my god, yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think that
mistake there, right? Because you're taking the word that you've used to classify things like the January 6th thing and whatever, right? Where your base is. Let's put it on one side, evil things that the regime does, and you're using it to defend the pedophile. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's, oh yeah, the regime is going against the pedophiles, and that's really, oh no, that doesn't, and I get it that there is ways to put them together, but that, on that subconscious level, people don't think that complexly. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Right. Well, I think this does sort of hurt him, and it particularly when you also contemplate whatever your broader feelings are on the, let's call it, MAGA infighting civil war stage of wherever we are. I don't participate in those because I don't particularly care necessarily, but we are all sort of vaguely aware that there are divisions and fractures inside of the Republican / narrower MAGA movement. And that there's competition.
There's the Ben Shapiro, Lindsey Graham side of MAGA.
Well, again,
the others.
Regardless of what you think about the dynamics of that infighting, there is still a fight for audience and a fight for the people who are the spiritual successors of whatever movement Donald Trump was running. And having been betrayed by Donald Trump several times on several things is a sort of juicy proposition for people to gather their own following and boost their own political ends, or either whether it's just completely self-serving or it's towards a more philosophic cause. There's different characteristics of that inside there. This sort of betrayal is a juicy thing to bite on, which is even this guy, because he was rich, of course he was going to be bought in just the same way that everyone else is. He was part of the elite. We knew that going in. We should have never been duped by him or something like that. So I think I agree with you that this might be his deplorable sort of situation. And I do think that, to me, it feels like this release and the momentum going here does sort of decrease enthusiasm at a minimum.
Going against Massey, right? Trying to get him unelected because he's trying to get these files released. So now we have, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. So now we have additional members in the anti-Trump coalition, consisting of Marjorie Taylor Greene and his defenders, putting money against Massey in his election, which is like Miriam Adelson. So I don't know, man. Like it's to make big claims, you usually need proof. But if we're talking about indications, it's not looking good.
Well, what's also interesting is how many people still talked to Epstein in a chummy fashion. Right? Like how many people should
Talking about chummy? Do I have a juicy one for you?
All right, sir. All right.
Did you? I've sent you a DM.
Yes, and you attached it to the space, which is a small little back and forth you had with Glenn Greenwald over Noam Chomsky. Over Noam Chomsky being involved in what you called defending Pol Pot, but also being a correspondent of Epstein's.
Right. So I saw the video he made about Chomsky on his program this morning. So, and that sort of put things in context for me. And there were a lot of juicy elements in there, actually. But basically, okay, let's catch everybody up, right? So I just made a throwaway comment, not thinking that Glenn fucking Greenwald was going to respond to me. Of all the things written about Greenwald, this is what gets me a response. Anyway, where I said, so basically Greenwald was expressing disbelief that Chomsky was interacting with Epstein in such a sort of friendly, jovial manner, and he even wrote like letters of recommendation of his character. We don't know to whom, but they seem to be out there, and all sorts of things. And Greenwald's like, what the hell? I know this person personally because apparently his second wife is Brazilian. So they spent a bunch of time in Brazil, and it appears that they hung out with Greenwald. Though, and interestingly, okay, wait for this. It appears that Chomsky pulled away from Greenwald because Greenwald's take on Trump was too soft. So this is not the kind of person that puts, friendship, over political disagreements. And yet, here he is chumming with Epstein and saying how enriched he felt by the friendship and how he introduced him to Ehud Barak, and they talked about the Taba negotiations, which for anybody following the Palestinian issue is a very important set of events, and how he, whatever. It's wild, right? And my thing the thing I was telling Greenwald, so people might not know this, and arguably I haven't read enough to take a completely encyclopedic position on Chomsky, but I have a strong sense that Chomsky is extremely overrated and really a damaging kind of person because there's a pattern there, and it's not necessarily defending Pol Pot, though that is a pretty bad thing. And so Greenwald was claiming that Chomsky was not defending Pol Pot. In fact, what he did was write a book during the genocide, or whatever you want to call it, that was happening in Cambodia, where they were killing, I don't know, a few million people died, maybe. Maybe I'm on the high side of that, but a lot of people. And Chomsky's angle was that the press reports were not credible. Okay, so when it all came out that it was really happening, what Chomsky responded with was I didn't say anything about what was happening. I was just saying that the response the reports were not very credible, which, if for you, some Harris aficionados, you'll notice this is I was wrong for the right reasons kind of response. Okay. So if you want to say he was defending defending Pol Pot or not, or whatever, I'm not willing to go down that, parse that deeply. I don't have enough command of the events. But he was, it's not an unreasonable thing to say. But he's also done other things. There was the recent one where everybody agrees, including Greenwald, that it was awful, which is he was arguing that people that were not vaccinated need to be separated from society, was his words. And then when asked, what would these people do even for getting, their groceries? You'd expect that Chomsky would say, somebody can give it to them. That's not what he said. He said, that's their problem. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So he fell for it 100%. And you could say that that's an old man feeling his frailty and fearing for his health and whatever. But I mean, you can't be the foremost scholar in psyops. And
well, okay, anyway. so he's sort of the modern George Bernard Shaw of his day, where George Bernard Shaw. I don't know if you've ever heard the clip, Alex, that floats around where he's advocating the gentle euthanasia of people who are unable to contribute what they consume in society, and saying that this is a nice and compassionate way of handling problems that were existing back in the time. And of course, that sounds very Naziistic, and that's because, well, George Bernard Shaw was sort of enamored with that type of.
Yeah, I don't even feel the Nazis went that far. They only focused on the cases they felt were clear. They weren't like balancing everybody and being like, "Oh, Comrade Schmidt, I don't think you're pulling your weight this month."
Exactly. Yeah. Come before the committee and tell them how that So there's this echo of that sort of elitist sentiment. That Chomsky would be sort of. It's not as stark, but it has echoes of that type.
Let me add the final piece to this whole story, which is his quote unquote contributions to linguistics. So the story going around, and again, I would have needed to be a lot more read up on it, but I feel I need to cover it because it's interesting and it has an AI angle to it. Is that Chomsky is a bully, right? He has been essentially ruling the field of linguistics with an iron fist, both with his status and with his, forceful, quote unquote, defense of his positions against anybody who might push against them. And in particular, one of the cases I cited was somebody who put out a pretty strong critique of Chomsky's position on the universal grammar. So again, for linguists out there, I'm sure you're going to tear me apart in this one, but I'll give you the very simple understanding of Chomsky's view, which is that there is some prerequisite grammar in the human brain that cannot be learned, that we all have, and that is how we pick up language. That if you do not have that prerequisite structure, you cannot pick up language, and therefore also that all human languages share a structure. Okay, that's my understanding, which I'm sure is wrong in some way, of Chomsky's position. Now, you might notice that position runs into trouble with some recent technological developments. So he put out a rejoinder saying, well, the LLMs, they just consume a lot more language than humans. But you'll notice that this takes an absolute argument and turns into an argument of degree, right? How much is needed. But then there was this experiment called Baby LM, which used about as much language as a baby will hear in the first, I don't know, however many years of their life, showing that it can pick up language pretty well out of 100 million words or something. So that's how it's in constant retreat. But all those years, Chomsky was suppressing opposing views. One particular case, that I cited in that thread, if anybody goes in and reads it, was, again, this person who put out a pretty strong critique of his views. And Chomsky, first of all, Chomsky's acolytes started calling him racist because he was doing some research in the Amazon, and they somehow extrapolated that what he was saying is that those tribes were not as advanced as others because their language was very poor or whatever, which is a fact. I'm sorry, their language is just did not have those features, which you might start to understand why Chomsky was upset about that kind of finding. But also Chomsky himself gave an interview to the Brazilian press, calling the guy, what was the word? Charlatan, right? And that had impact in him not getting the right research permissions to go and continue his research. So all I'm saying is, it's not like Chomsky has been all, nice and kind and scientific when he's fighting for his corner in linguistics. And also he's wrong, and also he's still not admitted as much.
Well, I'm not going to side on him being right or wrong, but I think there might be, at least in your portrayal of what he argued and the counter evidence, I would say at that level of just that particular delivery, I would say that there be room for disagreement as to what might be meant, because if you're talking about a biological structure being requisite in order to possess the ability for language, I don't think that the evidence is that we've figured out a mathematical algorithm for gradient descent that allows us to vectorize the concept and then find those valleys, right? Like, I don't think that I don't think that the two are necessarily in contradiction, because if it my cat could just be selectively, ignoring me, but my cat has heard a significant number of words uttered by me and has not yet begun to.
Of course, the point is not that he's saying that you need to be advanced enough to have the concept of language. His point was that language itself is insufficient to learn language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it doesn't contain enough information. You need to have.
Okay, if that's the direction of it, then I would then table my critique there. But that was just, okay.
Anyway, long story short, and then he put out a paper even
language cannot bootstrap itself would be the idea.
That's the I think that's his take, and again it touches onto universal grammars, because he connects that to shared features that all languages have, except they don't. Anyway, long story short, I just to give you also a slightly more charitable view, because I might have appeared as I think this guy is like evil. I think my take on Chomsky is that he takes very strong positions on things, and he never backtracks. He just never will say like, oh, you know what, that one I was wrong. Defending Pol Pot, yeah, I mean that was dumb, wasn't it? Whatever. It's like, well, I was right. It's just that I was critiquing the.
He does have a lot of Sam Harris sort of attitudes that guide him.
And long story short, I think that if you take it from that point of view, then yes, he's going to defend his relationship with Epstein. He's going to defend his takes on Pol Pot. He's going to defend his takes on linguistics. He's going to just fight every battle on every front, regardless of whether it's a consistent one. It makes sense. It's a good idea. So where I ended my conversation with Greenwald, and I'm not sure he even saw this message, but I kind of. It's kind of where my thing ends. It's like, all right, you're saying that, he has a very long intellectual career and he's going to make some mistakes from time to time. I get it. So in that long intellectual career, can you find me one case where he accepted a correction from somebody, right? Not himself, not saying like, here's my new take and my old take was wrong. No, it's saying like, you know what? This person found an error in my reasoning and I am now updating my thoughts. As far as I know, nobody has seen that. So I'm putting that in my corner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, look, and this is not me attacking Glenn Greenwald too strongly, but Glenn is not above, using descriptions like defending X or defending Y or something like that when he is attacking people that he is adversarial to, even if it's unfair. Right. Like he will use that sort of.
I like Greenwald, so I'm not taking it on him. I'm just it's an interesting sort of sequence of events. And I think a lot of people, especially with the left origin, have a very warm and sort of affectionate view on, and even people on the right, actually. A lot of the non-interventionists like Scott Horton will say very good things about Chomsky. And I just want to tell these people that it might just be that this guy is just fucking stubborn. And it happens that the things that he's stubborn about agree with your particular.
There are several things that Chomsky you can quote Chomsky on that do ring very true and can stand the test of time and are nice and sort of concise ways of articulating thoughts. That there he's definitely not someone who I would go to for a large corpus of deep insight. But, he does have some things that he's said that really can stand the test of time and are serve well to repeat as quotes.
There is a class of intellectual, and I put them in my epistemic courage, epistemic humility matrix. They are high courage, low humility. Okay, so they will go out there and take wild positions, but never retreat. And those people, if there is a good argument to be made for their position, they will fucking make that argument, and it will be glorious, But if there isn't, they will make an argument.
They will still just be just as loud.
Oh yeah, and people won't understand, why is this person not? How many times have you heard, right? You were so good on this topic, but you're terrible on that one. It's like,
that was actually how I described Sam Harris.
Absolutely.
A long time ago, was when people started to fall out of favor with him and I said, he's always been this way. You just actually had to be on the opposite side of the argument at times that he was making it to see how sort of clumsy he was in his articulated reasoning. So.
Yes, it is. He was on my list. Berenson is on that list. When I wrote that article on that piece, I'll attach to the space on epistemic humility. Sam Harris and Alex Berenson were on that sort of 2x2 matrix quadrant.
Wow, pairing Alex Berenson and Sam Harris together in any way whatsoever.
I am equal opportunity hater.
Okay, so just to sort of wrap up the Epstein story for this week before we move on to other things, the Washington Post put out an article that Epstein texted with House Democrats during Cohen hearing, documents show. Newly released documents from Jeffrey Epstein's estate show that the convicted sex offender texted with a Democratic member of Congress, Stacey Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands during a congressional hearing with Michael Cohen, and that those text messages may have influenced the Congresswoman's questions of Cohen, President Donald Trump's former personal attorney and fixer. In the text, Epstein appeared to be watching the February 2019 hearing in real time, and at one point informed Plaskett, whose name is redacted from the documents, that Cohen had brought up former Trump executive assistant Rona Graff in his testimony. At the time, Cohen was testifying before the House Oversight Committee against his former boss, alleging that Trump was racist, manipulated financial records, and directed hush money payments to cover up his extramarital affairs, allegations Trump denied. The president said on social media that Cohen was lying before testimony began. Quote, Cohen brought up Rona, keeper of the secrets, Epstein texted, misspelling Graff's first name. Quote, Rona, Plaskett responded. Quote, quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym? She added, suggesting she would question Cohen soon. Copies of the text messages were included in a trove of thousands of pages of documents containing Epstein's emails and other communications released Wednesday by the House Oversight Committee. The messages show Epstein was invested in what Cohen was sharing about Trump, the financier's former friend, during his testimony. Trump has provided different accounts of why he ended his decades-long relationship with Epstein and has tried to distance himself from the deceased sex offender, but he has previously denied knowing about Epstein's abuse. Quote, I had no idea, Trump told reporters in July 2019. I haven't spoken to him in many, many years. Though the name of Epstein's texting partner is redacted in the documents, timestamps on the text messages matched up with the video from the hearing, as well as the message's contents, indicating that Epstein was texting with Plaskett, who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands as its non-voting delegate in the House of Representatives. Reached by phone Thursday, Plaskett declined to answer the questions about the text messages and directed all inquiries to her congressional staff. Plaskett's chief of staff, Angelina Jabbar, said Thursday she was not in a position to confirm or not whether the Congresswoman was texting with Epstein at the hearing. She did not respond to follow-up questions Friday afternoon. So that's not everyone is coming away clean on the news coverage. Now, sure, people are already being, included in these roundups, but these roundups are long and they're individual names. They're not like isolating one incident or one person and making the situation look fairly dark. And dark, I mean by the fact that you have Epstein, who is actively reaching out in 2019, or 2018, about Trump and coordinating in real time with members of Congress personally, not like through associates, through a chain, just like personally, that he had personal connections with people, and that this opens questions of how many more people did he have the personal cell phones of that he was texting regularly to help him go after Donald Trump while he was under investigation by the Trump administration's Justice Department.
Well, it wasn't they go after like a straight, head-on collision go after, right? It was more of a gain leverage on or something like that, which is interesting. By the way, I find it fascinating that they put out things that make Plaskett look bad, because I thought this was a Democrat-controlled committee, or is it like a really actually bipartisan?
There was an initial release by the Democrats, but then there was also a release of information from the Republican side, sort of to flood the zone, because the Democrats were releasing stuff that was more hitting Trump specifically, but then the Republicans released something like 20,000 things to sort of flood the zone with additional information, so it wasn't just hitting Trump.
I see. Okay, so because Plaskett is, I don't know if you follow this story, but she was the one that called Matt Taibbi a so-called journalist, and did that incredibly moronic interrogation of him when they were speaking to the committee.
Yes.
So that's her, right? She's the one that said who's gonna attack Matt Taibbi on the Twitter files revelations. She's like, I'll do it. This is all politicians are craven and, or whatever. Most, I don't know, but a lot of them hide it a lot better than Stacey Plaskett.
Well, the final article in the Epstein, I might have prematurely said that the previous one was the final, but this is the actual final. No takesy backsies. So Trump has decided, I guess, that some aspects of the Epstein story were no longer hoaxy. And ABC News, Trump calls for DOJ probe into Epstein ties, including Clinton. President Donald Trump, in a social media post on Friday, said he will be asking AG Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, together with our great patriots at the FBI, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, J.P. Morgan Chase, and many other people and institutions to determine what was going on with them and him. So, no longer a complete hoax made up by the Democrats. It's, I guess there were some Democrats now involved. We got to, there were things that could be investigated, I guess, during the investigation that we could be doing, I guess. Why not?
By the way, from what was released, I think hardest hit is Michael Tracy, I fear.
So I've loosely followed what Michael Tracy has sort of been doing, and there are cases where I kind of see a point he's making. I don't know why he's so obsessed with the story. Again, from a couple months ago, I sort of made a joke that you don't want to be the person who just starts saying, actually, it's, a phebophilia or something. Right? When you're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, sort of like, why are you trying to defend the crime? It was someone, he was, abusing people who were underage of consent and young. It doesn't matter whether the technical term is a phebophilia, hebephilia, or pedophilia. You're not making his activity better by pointing out that some of these girls were post-pubescent, right? It's like, there's nothing to be gained from this. There is absolutely nothing to be gained. Don't be that person. So in that case, which I think Michael Tracy was being asked by Glenn Greenwald on when he appeared once talking about these things, Glenn Greenwald's like, why are you doing this particular thing? Why are you so adamant about defending Epstein in this way? But there were a couple points, I will say, that Tracy has made that do seem to be somewhat important, in that one of the victims who has been talked about mentally gets attributed as being a victim in the sense that everyone imagines Epstein has victims, which is underage girls that were, sort of in bad situations and trafficked by by Ghislaine Maxwell, and in many cases held prisoner on the island in some stories, and that this one person didn't even supposedly meet them until she was in her like lower 20s, so that like she's being touted as a victim, but she was an escort supposedly in her lower 20s, and so he could have committed crimes against her, but it's not the same sort of victimization story that is there, and she's one of the most prominent ones.
Yep. Look, and again, Michael Tracy's definitely in that category where if there is a good argument to be made, he will make it. Okay, like that, and this is why it's good for him to be in there, and also I guess to your point, it's good. There is a purpose for somebody to be defending even Epstein, because ultimately we want the truth. So somebody's got to hold that corner. If it's Michael Tracy, it's Michael Tracy.
But my ephebophilia or hebophilia sort of statement does not apply to the literal truth about the crimes, right? So to the extent that Tracy is actually saying like he's being accused of pedophilia, but all these women were in their 20s, that would be a totally sort of fair game like argument to defend, in the sense of like we're building this massive web of pedophilia conspiracy, but all these women were of age. That would be a totally like salient point to go like, this is bonkers what the narrative that we're painting here. But so it is slightly different, but he does seem rather passionately defending Epstein's activity.
It's very, I mean, he, to the point of minimizing whether he had, very young victims or not, and things like that, which, at that point it's like, okay, all right. I'm done. But there's another fun part about what he does, and I'll say that before I get to my point, which was sidetracked by mentioning Michael Tracy, is that he, oh my God, what was I saying? Anyway, I lost my Michael Tracy point. All
right, I apologize.
I'll get back to the Epstein part, which is like I think we've wondered on these conversations, what his deal was, and I think what is becoming to me at least clearer and clearer is that Epstein was a so let's call it international relations freelancer. Okay, he was being. He was making himself available and connected with various players to assist, often Israel, but not necessarily and exclusively, and not definitely in any way that they would ask. Like he had his own agenda as well. It appears, right? So you see emails where he's angling to speak to Lavrov and other things like that, and some of that was just him trying to create a connection, right? He might help somebody just to make sure that they know who he is, so that if he contacts them in the future, he'll get a response, right? Like, but it's very, very clear that he was, he was operating in a semi-independent way, which is feeding into my other hypothesis about him, which is that he was essentially the heir to Robert Maxwell, right? He was essentially the following up from that sort of intelligence operation that Maxwell had, which was it, in close cooperation with Israel? Sure. All right. But he also was his own player, and he made a lot of money doing it. And, he died in a weird way that indicates maybe he wasn't always giving them what they wanted. I don't know. It's more complicated than this, but the fact that he was involved in international affairs, he was brokering deals with governments of all sorts, from Kyrgyzstan to Africa to whatever, that appears to be proven now beyond a reasonable doubt. And what that kind of player is interesting, right? Because I don't think we have a ton of examples of that. It appears to have been more common in the older times, when you had these like British sort of elite people just kind of like trotting the globe and doing business both for themselves and the British Empire. But that's where you have to go to find analogs to work with.
Well, prior to this sort of dump and explosion this week, the story of Epstein was, at least as far as the official government sort of position, or like all sorts of government positions, was that he was not blackmailing people actively. He did not do that as a habitual sort of thing. He was knowing all these people and talking to all these people had absolutely nothing to do with getting leverage over them, over untoward things. At the moment, people's takeaway, and I say people not to mean all people, but like the people who are riding with this sort of stuff is a large indictment on Trump, seem to be taking away the conclusion, not that he was definitely part of a vast sort of history of blackmailing people and using illicit affairs that he had sort of recorded them doing against them. It was just Trump that he had that on. That the Trump he has these things on, because in one section it was supposedly that he had evidence of Trump actually harming girls or having sex with underage girls in his purview, either at his house or not necessarily on the island. I don't think any of the emails put Trump on the island, but like at least at his house or at parties and things like that. And so the idea would be if you accepted that premise that Trump definitely did that, and that the emails would then demonstrate that Epstein possessed this information and used it and kept it in order to strategically weaponize it as blackmail in some way or use it as leverage, but that Trump was the only human being on the planet who he had this on. Like that would be what you would have to accept as the narrative, which is like, okay, so that's a weird one. I guess he really lucked out on having that compromat, years before Trump became a political quantity, right? But if you do accept that, then you sort of have to accept that he has dirt on a whole bunch of other people. But outside of dirt, let's say that he doesn't have the sexual dirt that people were imagining as part of his activity. We do see evidence, at least in these emails, that he does try to gather information on some level to strategically utilize. Right. Not necessarily in a blackmail sense, maybe, but in a strategic fashion. Right. Texting the Democratic senator in order to ask specific questions is that type of play. Knowing things and then finding ways that you can use them later on to your benefit is that type of activity. So at a minimum, we know that he's capable of trying to do that at certain times. At a minimum, yes. Right? So you talk to enough people, you get them drunk and partying, and you learn things about them. That is leverage you can pull out at any point in time to execute strategically, whether it's blackmail or not.
Well, the other thing is that what people don't understand about sophisticated players is that their demands do not come in in an anonymous letter delivered to your door with collage letters from a newspaper saying, give me the money or the tapes, we'll go to the CNN or something. That
is a lost art, though. You have to admit that is a charming manifestation. Back, yes.
If I was in the blackmail business, I would definitely be going retro. Yes. And doing that. But given that I'm not, I feel it's not my place. Anyway, the fact that they know that he knows that, he has what he has, and he's seen what he's seen, and he's been where he's been when they've been doing whatever they've been doing, is sufficient and does not have to be discussed. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to bring that up when you send somebody an email and saying, can you do me a favor, please?
There's a common knowledge aspect of I know that he knows and he knows that I know he knows, right?
Yeah. Right. So when he was, there was one email release, not now, I think it was the previous batch, where he was like cussing out Lex Wexner, was it? Or another one where he was calling his children retarded and like all sorts of things. This is the guy that gave him like hundreds of millions of dollars or something. And it's like, how does this work? It's like, well, if you got somebody by the balls, for example, right, maybe you get away with doing that. I don't know.
I want to invite people to request to speak if you have any comments about anything we've discussed so far. Alex, if you don't mind, we have there's no more Epstein on the table, but Trump's week has not been any better in other in other zones, he's had a particularly bad week controlling his public perception. So if you want to request to speak, go ahead and volunteer. Alex, we're going to move on to some of the rest of his bad week. There's 2 clips from Laura Ingraham interview I'm going to play that gave him a decent amount of pushback and sort of soured the taste on some of his supporters' tongues with regards to international importation of individuals for various purposes.
There's never going to be a country like what we have right now.
And does that
the
mean
Republicans have to talk about it, Laura.
And does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we
a
have
country
plenty of talented people
no, you
here.
don't. No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put
How did we ever do it before?
Well,
when you and I were
I'll give you an example. In Georgia, they raided because they wanted illegal immigrants out. They had people from South Korea that made batteries all their lives. You know, making batteries are very complicated. It's not an easy thing and very dangerous. A lot of explosions, a lot of problems. They had like 500 or 600 people, early stages, to make batteries and to teach people how to do it. Well, they wanted them to get out of the country. You're going to need that, Laura. I mean, I know you and I disagree on this. You can't just say a country's coming in, going to invest $10 billion to build a plant, and going to take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years, and they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
So, Alex, I don't know if you are aware, but those stupid Americans don't know how to do any of this stuff, so you can't fire them. That left a sour taste on people's tongues. Paul Ramirez, you requested to speak, and I did approve you. I don't see you accepting, or maybe you're having technical difficulty.
Oh, I can talk.
Oh, wow. Okay, there we go. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks. No, and I appreciate you, Gator. When it comes to the Epstein files, I have a really big suspicion that it's purely being used as a cudgel to manipulate Trump and only Trump. And I always say that because I remember James O'Keefe. He had an undercover video with Pam Bondi on a date, as he usually does, and where she's talking about how they have tens of thousands of videos, but they're of kids. So like the mountain of evidence, and that's not what's discussed. But what's being leaked is the person who's the most implicated in the leaks so far is Trump. And so it's like, to me, I mean, that's my suspicion, and who knows what's true or who James O'Keefe really is. But that, like any discussion about like the actual victims of the trafficking, or any mention of the people in the videos is left out. The only, like the people who's getting hurt the most is Trump. And there's a lot of things going on, like whether it's what you're, the visas that are, that you just, the video you played, or, Israel wants a 20-year contract, military contract, or a foreign aid contract, or, like, who knows what's like actually how the Epstein files are being used. And also, and when it comes to Noam Chomsky, his biggest critic was Thomas Sowell. During the Great Society debates in the 60s and 70s, Noam Chomsky wanted, he was the one pushing the welfare, and all the things that Thomas Sowell was arguing would hurt the Black communities. And thank you. And you can mute me after this. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, currently it looks like, the hot potato is going on Trump's way with the Epstein stuff, but he also sort of contributed to that by closing off the story by saying it's all a hoax. It's like sort of over. It's done with. So as far as the ability to release something that damages anyone, it's going to be in the Democrats' hands to find something that involves Trump in any way, even if it is distorted in some way of how it really impacts him, and then sort of release it because they have the ability to selectively do that to impact him, which is where the Republicans had their response and, dumped 20,000 documents that include a whole bunch of other people who were still talking to Jeffrey Epstein all the way while he was being prosecuted for, again, like the second time for this activity, where he ultimately was found guilty and, quote, killed himself in a prison cell. So it's not, I don't believe, a situation where what we'll call the apparatus, the political apparatus that might be aligned against Trump like it was in his first term, where there was what you call the deep state aligned against him. I don't think that is what you are seeing in this case. I think he brought it upon himself by attempting to push the topic out of the public mind whenever Pam Bondi and crew sort of fumbled the whole mission and pissed his fan base off, pissed his followers off. He wanted to try to make his fan base shut up by saying it's all a Democrat hoax, and anyone who is, I mean, I believe he put out a Truth Social post. I'm 99.9% sure he put out a Truth Social post that said that any one of his supporters who is still actually, focused on this topic is no longer a supporter of his. To some effect, that's what he said. Like,
yep. Yeah, I think
he brought it upon himself in that way.
One or other. It's connecting that with this latest comments of his. It strikes me that, he could follow the exact same policy he's talking about, right? But not messages this way. He could have said, yes, of course, we're going to kick out, these people and those people and whatever, right? We probably need very targeted, allowances for specific skills that, don't exist on the open market. They exist in, Intel, but if you want somebody else to start up, it's kind of hard. And sometimes we might need some infusion of highly capable, highly skilled laborers, but that is an exception to the overall direction, which is less immigration, right? He could say something like that, and it'll go over a lot better than whatever the fuck he thought he was doing here. Which
there's no good Americans. You can't hire Americans for this stuff.
You don't have them here. Like, oh, come on! Nobody makes missiles like the Koreans.
This involves calculus.
Oh my god! I mean, anyway, but it makes me think that he might be slipping on the messaging angle, which is one of his strengths historically. Because if you think about it, he's taking with Epstein, right? He's taking a situation where, let's say everything was out, right? And he was partaking, in some shady ways. That becomes another grab for him. Like the fact that he's into like girls and young girls, I don't think anybody thinks that's not like, or rather, I'm sure there's some people who think he walks on water or whatever, but like, most people kind of expect that a little bit. I don't know. But he's taking it from that to I will protect corruption. And that is a killer. So he's really trading, a position that I think he can dig himself out of and has multiple times in the past, like dating porn stars while your wife is pregnant. I don't know. And trading that position in for, literally cutting the legs out of your own coalition. The other hypothesis, of course, is that he doesn't care about himself per se, but he's protecting something else. And I think that one is definitely serious, and we should be considering that too.
What would the something else be if you had to propose?
Well, there is a particular topic that he has literally destroyed his entire presidency and agenda to protect. So that's where my mind goes. And it's not entirely unthinkable that it's involved here.
Okay, and that
do I need to
really the H-1B question specifically?
Oh no, sorry, I was not talking about the H-1B. I'm talking about the Epstein thing.
Apologies. The way that you started it, you were talking. It sounded like you were talking about a balance between, having policies of closing the border and the ICE and stuff like that, and the H-1Bs would be the exception to it. And I thought that's where we were.
No. Sorry. I'm just saying it feels like he's slipping on messaging. I think that's for sure. But I am also wondering if he's putting himself in these positions that he doesn't even have to, in some cases, because it's not. He might have to for reasons that we can't immediately tell. Okay.
So there's a slight disconnect, not a complete overlap between the H-1B topic and other things. So he's slipping on messaging overall, which is involved, but not completely related to the idea that he's been focusing on an interest that isn't specifically his.
Let me put it differently. He in another time, he might have been able to pull off whatever it is he's trying to do here. He no longer seems to have the messaging chops to do it.
Well, one thing that's different in this current incarnation of Trump here, and I can't believe this as far as emotionally speaking, I can't believe this, but we haven't even finished the first year of the Trump second term yet. Like,
that is true.
COVID felt like 5 years crammed into 1 year. Like, that was a long year. This also feels very similarly in like, this is there's aspects of my life where it feels like time has moved very fast. But when it comes to the Trump presidency aspect, it feels like time has moved very slow. And there have been many years that have elapsed of this presidency so far. And in this particular term, he has not had the actual structural opposition that he had in the first term. And he seems to do very well when he is working against the wind and is facing, people coming at him, and he is, juking and moving, evading their punches and then throwing counter punches that land. Like, that seems to be his element. But then it's almost like if you imagine that you are pushing against a door trying to open it, and then all of the sudden it opens on you and your momentum's still going forward and you fall into the room and start crashing into everything that was sort of behind the door. That in some way is how I would, make a metaphor for some of what happens. He's had so many, let's say, victories in the sense that he has gotten the policy that he wants, at least for a term. Like, the tariffs are all, he's just doing whatever he wants on any given day, setting numbers possibly by hitting a randomization button on the computer and letting that pick it. He has his ICE policy being carried out. He's had so many things where he's largely just done whatever he wants and has not necessarily had opposition, that I think he has lost his ability to navigate a political landscape where the opposition in a sense is quasi-organic from the people, so to speak, right? It is not all manufactured by an adversarial propaganda network or an adversarial legal network that is strongly weaponized against him. It is him doing what he wants and actually having to deal with sort of the response overall of what that actually looks like. And so when you raise tariffs and the economy in most people's minds, the average citizen's minds, has not improved significantly, and their wages have not gone up considerably, and the grocery prices are at least as bad on average as they were in the last administration to them. They have not seen the relief. And the entire time you're still on television telling them that the economy is great because the stock market went up. That just is echoes to them. That's the stuff they've heard their entire life. And just a new person who happens to have a whimsical attitude about the way that he utters his prose does not change that reality and can sour them, which then has the chain or the domino effect, let's say, of making them more likely to be soured on other items where he does not deliver what they thought he was going to deliver for them, which I think you see evidence for all over. Whether you think in some of the circumstances it has to do with him supporting Israel on things that they want for whatever reason, I think largely my view has a lot of evidence for describing what's happening for him.
Perhaps his whole shtick is having a coherent deposition. He doesn't find it, he just moves on to the next one. He can't. If you don't actually know what to do, right? The next best thing is to have a good reason for why you didn't. I don't know. I'm not enough of a Freudian psychologist to finish this one, but I don't know, man. It's just, yeah, I agree with you. I think we're all bewildered on some level. I don't think there's anybody who fully understands what's going on.
One more, the second Laura Loomer clip here. This one is about importing Chinese students. I believe the quantity was something on the order of 600,000 Chinese students.
Folks are not thrilled about this idea of hundreds of thousands of foreign students in the United States. We have about 350,000 Chinese. One point during COVID, you were going to, push to, get them out, but that was pulled back. You've said as many as 600,000 Chinese students could come to the United States. Why, sir, is that a pro-MAGA position when so many American kids want to go to school and there are places not for them and these universities are getting rich off Chinese money?
Sure. Never said about China, but we do have a lot of people coming in from China. We always have. China and other countries. We also have a massive system of colleges and universities. And if we were to cut that in half, which perhaps makes some people happy, you would have half the colleges in the United States go out of business.
So what?
Well, I think that's a big deal.
Are they fans?
You would have the historically,
United States.
Yeah, but you would have, as you know, historically black colleges and universities would all be out of business. You would have a system of colleges and universities.
So we're dependent on China to keep our university system going?
But I think it's good to have. I actually think it's good to have outside countries. Look, I want to be able to get along with the world.
They're not the French. They're the Chinese. They spy on us. They steal our intellectual property.
What, do you think the French are better?
Yeah.
I mean, really? I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm not so sure. We've had a lot of problems with the French where we get taxed very unfairly on our technology, where, they put 25% taxes on American products. Look, assuming everyone treats us badly, because that's the way I am, but we take in trillions of dollars from students. The students pay more than double when they come in from most foreign countries. I want to see our school system thrive, but at the same time, I know you and I disagree. We're never going to agree on it, but that's okay. And it's not that I want them, but I view it as a business. We have millions and millions of people. Also, I want to get along with countries if possible. People are shocked. Remember, Hillary Clinton said, we'll be in a war. I stopped 8 wars in the last 9 months. I don't want to be in wars. If I am in a war, we're going to win the thing fast, and it'll be violent. But you know what? I don't want to be in wars. But one thing, you don't want to cut half of the people, half of the students from all over the world that are coming into our country, destroy our entire university and college system. I don't want to do that.
I wouldn't lose any.
And don't forget, MAGA was my idea. MAGA was nobody else's idea. I know what MAGA wants better than anybody else. And
now, Alex, he knows MAGA better than anyone else. Does this sound like something that MAGA was clamoring for?
Oh, absolutely. That's why they're all. Nick Fuentes is turning into the #1 media personality in the United States because Trump.
So, a couple observations is, I'm not in any way someone who pays attention to Laura Ingraham, but this is Laura Ingraham, a opinion broadcaster on Fox News, and I would have to say that interview style was modestly contentious. It was not. Yes. It was not a softball. You could disagree with the direction that her questions were coming to, or the philosophical angle they were coming from, but she did not really give him an easy time. And this is just a comparison. anytime I watch a network like MSNBC, it's really difficult for me to find examples like that where of a similar nature. Most things at the level of presidential candidates wind up being so softball and filleting. Honestly, that it's embarrassing. Like this was sort of combative and a little bit refreshing in the way that she didn't let him just get away with whatever he wanted to say.
Yeah, look, the thing is that I think on some level, Trump is asking people to do things that are, red lines, right? Like if Laura Ingraham with her audience is like, yeah, no, totally, bring more of them, in fact, let's double it, not have it, but double. It doesn't, it's like he's asking her to like starve, It's like, all right, I love you, but like up to a point, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna, sort of sit here and have you, make me look like an idiot for everything I've been saying for years. Like there is a point to which they'll go, and farther than that is hard for them. And on many of these cases, I feel like Trump has hung himself, right? Because we can talk about the evidentiary standards for making accusations against people. But Trump can't when he's executing people because he claims they're narco terrorists, whatever. But when they arrest one of them, who had the audacity not to die, what do? Do they put him in prison? No, they send him back to his country. Oh, that's weird. Could it be that these are just random civilians? I don't know.
Well, they were only blowing up the boat, Alex. It was the person's proximity to the boat that made that a violent proposition.
It was a narco boat. The boat was a terrorist, not the person.
They weren't mad at the guy. They were mad at the boat.
No. They're mad at the sinner, at the sin, not the sinner. Anyway, long story short, and this was another case where she was like, well, this is China. This is not France, And what are you going to say to that when you've built up that whole fucking China boogeyman image, right? Like he's cornered.
Well, he's not unique in building up the China boogeyman image.
No.
The China boogeyman image has been...
Trust me, he's not unique in hanging himself either. I'm not saying that like he has a monopoly on this. I'm just commenting on this particular situation. Where, I'm not convinced that China like has plans to invade America or whatever, right? People tell me that China has only invaded, it had one war since the 70s, and it was a brief clash with Vietnam that they lost. So they don't, I might be completely wrong, but it totally could be that they just view, global international politics differently, that they don't care as much about the rest of the world as others do. Maybe not. Maybe they're just normal. All I'm saying is, if we had a much more like information rich conversation about this, then we could talk about allowing Chinese students to come in the same breath, because it's ambiguous, right? When you portray China as the source of all evil, well, then how are you going to defend bringing, hundreds of thousands of students over? Like it's a problem.
Even without military conflict, there's many stories of China using students that it sends to the overseas, but primarily to the United States, where effectively, now, of course, these may be isolated cases. Okay, so I'm not saying it is, the vast majority of students that do come here. But when they want to use a student to sort of conduct espionage of some kind, they typically have the student come over and then utilize the family that stays in China as leverage to induce the student to do whatever sort of what they want. And there are often handlers who will check in from time to time and remind the student of what they are supposed to be focused on.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. If you had to guess which country in the world does the most meddling in other countries via intelligence operations, which one would that be, you think?
I'm guessing that it's going to be Israel. So you didn't have that many.
Weirdly enough,
really?
No. I don't. I mean, I wouldn't. I'm surprised by your answer, but I wouldn't say that. They're not that big a country. They don't have that many people. It takes a lot of It takes a lot of work to.
I mean, other than that, I would guess it would be us because of course we would do that.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I don't know if we have the same exact dynamics of that type of operation.
Well, I people who have done extremely thorough research on the number of regime change operations that the U.S. has run throughout the Civil War, throughout the Cold War, not the Civil War. The list is ridiculous. I mean, I'm talking like 60 to 80 countries having attempted, not all successful, regime change operations. Okay, like all I'm saying is, fair,
to be fair,
that
the question is the question is not whether we're hypocrites. I mean, the question is not, I guess that would make us hypocrites if we didn't let the other countries spy on us. That is sort of the game, right? You do want to do more spying than your adversary does on you, right? That is,
of course, and you naturally, the U.S. has its own ways of getting information from China. But all I'm saying is, that's one thing. Okay. Like countries spying on each other and whatever. I don't know about the specific situations. I'm sure they have some nasty people doing nasty things because that's how the underbellies of large organizations work. But okay. Like all I'm saying is I guess I'm making Trump's point, which is, how are they different from any other country? I mean, France, my God, France, right? Like people see France and think of like cheese and wine, and they don't think that they've somehow managed, this is breaking the last few years, but they had gotten the currency of like many Western African states, the ECOWAS group, I think mostly, tied to the franc, which means that basically their gold reserves were in France and they were effectively controlling the currency, even though they weren't any longer, the colonial masters, but they were just controlling their economies, and this was going on for decades and who cares, right? I don't know, nations do nasty things to each other. Are you going to take that out on the people? I don't know. It's a strange situation. Anyway, all I'm saying is, let me take it from a different tack. Okay, like Trump has, claims to have invented MAGA and whatever, and I don't know if he doesn't understand this. I think on some level he does. Which is that he's not really invented this. He is stepping in to articulate something, which is an undercurrent in American society that speaks to this America First instinct. And if he stops being, an authentic expression of it, somebody else will. And it doesn't, people don't care about him specifically. In fact, a lot of people that vote for him, are baffled with themselves for who they're voting for. But it is because he steps into those shoes and is articulating those values, and that makes him the best choice for those people. And to the degree that he will stop doing that, he will lose those people. It's not personal loyalty in any sense. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the one thing I found particularly interesting about his explanation or defense was that if we do not have a large influx of Chinese nationals to attend our schools, the HBCUs will suffer.
That was amazing.
which I was like, okay, I didn't know that was the dynamic now, but I'm learning so much every day from our president about how things work.
How will the historical black colleges support themselves without hundreds of thousands of Chinese students?
Because that's the question. That's the question I want to know. Okay, Paul Ramirez, you had your hand raised. Paul Ramirez, you had your hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
I apologize. I remember you asked people if they want to say something at the end. I'll wait until the end. I apologize. You have a good flow.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. I remember during COVID, one of the reasons why they, or in my opinion, reasons why they want to shut the conversations down is nobody wanted to ask the question, why were we working with through Echo Health Alliance? Why were we working with the CCP? So like, do we even actually understand our relationship with China?
I at this point, I don't think there is anyone who understands the full breadth of everything. I think, years ago, I used to work for one of the larger communications company, one of the, of course, most evil companies in the world as far as people's opinions of them, particularly when they call customer service. But, one of the jokes I always made was that we were a communications company that doesn't communicate internally, where you were always sort of discovering what it was that the company was doing on any given day, because there wasn't. And Alex, I think we've talked about this before, where it is actually difficult sort of to have all of your employees, when you reach a certain size, sort of on the same page as what the company itself was doing. I think you made an allusion to someone who said, when I want everyone in the company to know something, I use the New York Times or something along those lines, where it's like,
yes, this is I mentioned that on my, this is public information, I'm not revealing anything secret. On the board of my startup was Ray Ozzie, who had been placed as the CTO, the chief software architect, was given the chief software architect role at Microsoft, which is a role that Bill Gates had before, when Bill Gates left. Okay, he was that high up. And I've never spoken with anybody who's run a company with hundreds of thousands of people. So, when he tells me stuff, I try to listen. And that was one of the things he said. He was like, look, if I want people in the company to pay attention, I don't send a memo, I go to the press. Which, it's the essence of what you were saying.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't get the quote right, but I got the essence right. So the idea that the president, ideally, you'd want the president to sort of know everything that's happening in the executive that he is operating. And there are human limitations to that being a possibility. I mean, just the sheer amount of things that are happening makes it a situation where they can't actually know everything that's going on. But of course, you could say, well, there's a degree to which they could have the high level view of everything that's going on. But even then, there is what you might consider a version of the deep state that isn't the nefarious conspiracy deep state, where all the people who are, working across administrations are keeping sort of an internal policy for themselves that they try to massage each incoming administration to maintain to some degree, or they only allow them to affect it some way. We'll just consider just a previous president setting on things, and setting off activity that has its own momentum, let's say in the CIA or something along those lines, where the next presidents or the presidents after them are barely aware that they're continuing. The CIA compartmentalizes to try to keep things secret, so that compartmentalization precludes a lot of people from being in the know. And maybe wind gets to the president at times that these activities are going on, but then even then it's probably in a particular context, and therefore the global aerial view of what is going on gets lost, and the president is relying on summaries of all the activity that's going on. And there's a degree to which he knows the story, but then there's probably a degree to which he has absolutely no idea. And therefore, the full dynamics of the spy versus spy that might be going on between China and the United States is sort of has an aspect of anarchism involved, I would say. I don't know the magnitude of it, but I would say that does exist, because certain operations do wind up being carried out in secret and being compartmentalized to the point where they just sort of even get lost. And if you think about the topics we've covered in the last week or two, which is finding this quote burn bag in the Comey story, where he was had memos talking about certain meetings with inside of the Oval Office with Brennan and stuff like that. Those types of activities can go on all the time in order to try to protect certain activities that you're engaged in, whether legitimate or not, from winding up being upset or having oversight. So I think knowing the full scope of activity is unfortunately not something we can realistically expect, given the complexity of the things that we've been involved in and the size of the apparatus altogether. Alex, I think this is actually a good time, since he did mention China and COVID, to sort of for you to bring up a parallel sort of topic, which was your Together trial victory this week, where you had, I'll quickly summarize it, then you can give the more detailed summary and story, where you had been, we'll call it a hawk, during COVID. I had put out a Substack. Yes. I had put out a Substack article reviewing a large study at one point in time, and I made very specific findings that wound up becoming contentious, particularly in the quote heterodox circles that you and I had traveled in, where David Fuller of Rebel Media had went on an attack against Brett and Heather Heying and Brett Weinstein over work they had done during the pandemic, and had attacked one of my pieces because they had made reference to it, but he had gotten my piece wrong, and I went on like a 4 or 5 day counterattack against him, in which I effectively embarrassed him and even sort of made him retreat from the internet overall, because he's been gone pretty much since then. And you wound up doing a lot of work similarly, but, carrying threads where I sort of dropped them off, and reviewing a whole bunch of studies when it came to ivermectin and related items in that phase. So what happened was, you did a review on something called the Together trial. You did the complex mathematics of addition and subtraction and found out that certain numbers weren't summing correctly. You had even lamented a couple weeks ago that you could do all this work, it could be clear and evident, people can verify it, and it still doesn't matter. But it does seemingly possibly matter, because at least even if you don't get direct recognition, similar items that you had called out were just now sort of acknowledged, and the paper got retracted. That's the high level summary.
Well, one of the papers got retracted, right? So this is for people who don't care about this stuff, and honestly, I envy you. This is a platform trial, which means that they ran a very long trial. And they published a bunch of papers out of it. And this one that got retracted was the first one, and really one of the less noticed papers from that trial. So in a sense, it's kind of a nothing burger, because it was about another drug called metformin that, some people were pushing for, but, none of the people that, we know were talking about it. It was more of a kind of a respectable early treatment, maybe. It's very alive in the longevity community. I think it's a diabetes drug. Okay. But when I get into something, as you may have noticed, I try to really cover it, right? Because I don't know, it's something obsessive about my brain, where I'm like, well, if I haven't really gone all the way to the depths that I can, where people can sort of accuse me of cherry picking, right? I do the opposite of cherry picking, where I pick literally anything that might possibly look like fruit off that branch. So in this case, I reviewed all their papers, and then I had come through their metformin paper a few times, and I was like, well, it's also funny in the same way that their other papers are funny, and I'm in a unique position to notice this, because I now have a full instantiation of their entire trial in my head. So I guess I should write this, and I did. And yeah, I noted that they had negative patients showing up. If you took certain subsets of their patient populations as reported, you had negative patients showing up. And also, the other thing that I noticed is that according to their protocols, again, this is might be a little too technical for people, but the way that particular trial was structured, they said basically at 25%, 50%, and 75% of the intended number of patients that we want to bring into this trial, we will take a peek at the results. And if the results are way too good or way too bad, we are going to stop the trial and either publish the results or stop the trial and say it doesn't work. So far, so good.
That last part you mentioned is somewhat of a standard procedure.
Somewhat of a standard
in it as an attempt to reduce the potential for harm in particular,
you can totally
or
why
spare resources. If you're doing something. If you're doing something where you're like, oh, we're going to try to, we're going to do something where we're studying the cure of paralysis, and you do a test on 100 and it was going to be a test of 1,000 and all 100 wind up being cured of paralysis, you might just go, okay, we're going to stop early. This seems like it's we got a signal here, right? Like that's what you would say.
Yes.
Or if 100 die, you'd go, whoa, we're killing people. We need to stop this, right? So it's not a crazy thing to do.
Right. Well, yeah, but as you know, and you can probably explain to me better than I can explain to you, those peaks create distortions in the statistical power you have to be able to have.
In frequentist statistics, it causes a problem, yes.
Yes. And this trial was Bayesian, but you will absolutely love the interview I found with a statistician where he admits that it is actually a frequentist trial using Bayesian language. Because they've done weird.
Well, so that's okay. So just to summarize what that is, I can summarize what that is though. So in a frequentist statistic paradigm, everything is randomized to the point where you only get to perform the test, and that is the conclusion you have. You do not get to aggregate results. So when you do take this peak, that portion of the data is concluded and is now actually supposed to be separated from any further things. But for some philosophical reasons, not relating to statistics, such as like trying to, like potentially biasing yourself as you conduct further parts of the experiment to affect the numbers, but also specifically speaking, when you gather the numbers and generate this statistic, that is the conclusion of that data aggregation. So when you're saying you lose power, that's because you're actually operating from a smaller sample by taking that peak, because the remaining sample that you will actually be able to utilize where you didn't take the peak is now a smaller data set, which means it's fuzzier.
Well, I don't know how the adjustments work. It's not, I didn't sense that it was as severe as like entirely throwing away the data, but they do effectively take on the responsibility to expand their sample set somewhat to make up for the implicit bias that they admit they added. Anyway, long story short, the problem was that they had said that, look, when we peak at like 25% of patients, we need to have a probability of 20% or less that the drug works for us to reject it, okay? And when we peak at 50% of patients, we need to have a probability of 40% or less than that it works for us to reject it, okay? So basically, they were creating these gates that were higher and higher for more patients. That they were the larger the population they were scanning at, they were demanding a higher barrier of like likely to work for them to continue. Okay. Now the problem was that they rejected the trial, and it had like something like 28% probability of superiority. But at the same time, they had not gotten their 40% of patients enrolled. Okay. So that 28% number is a very interesting number because it's a number that it clears them from the first hurdle, or was supposed to anyway. So the question arises, at which interim analysis was this conclusion made that this drug should be stopped? Because if it was the first, then they shouldn't have done it. And if it was the second, they didn't have enough patients. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing. If you see the retraction notice, it says something like, we found an error in the data, and that error caused them inadvertently to cancel the trial, even though they shouldn't have on the basis of their rules. Okay? And that's why we're retracting the paper. The problem is that the data as published, not corrected for any error, was not sufficient to stop the the trial. And separately, they had an error. Okay. Or anyway, lots of errors, but that specific one that I found. So these are two separate things that they conflated. And in addition, they sort of attributed that to not this being not intentional. Okay. When in fact, what happened is that there's a lot of evidence that, yes, this was very intentional, including how deceptively they worded the rationale for which they canceled the trial, which was they said, well, we canceled it. We canceled the trial for futility, and in our second interim analysis barrier, the efficacy, the probability of superiority has to be 40%. Now, they didn't say that they canceled it at the second interim analysis. They just put two sentences together. But if you're not reading carefully, you form the conclusion that it was done at the second interim analysis. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, so to me that says intent, right? Because if there's cover up, right? If you're being tricky with your use of language, you're trying to cover something. And if you're trying to cover something, it means not only that you did something wrong, but that you know it. That's me. Anyway, so even in this retraction, A, there was the fact that they waited for 3.5 years to do it, and B, there was the fact that they somehow went out of their way to protect the integrity of the researchers, which A, I mean, they have no way of knowing, and B, if they wanted to look a little bit more carefully, they would see that there's, if not proof, like strong evidence of the opposite. So anyway, long story short, I was shocked to see it retracted, to be completely honest with you.
Sure.
This is not something I expected. I still have some inquiries to do to figure out who even put in the expression of concern that led to the retraction. I think there's somebody I need to talk to that might have done it. I do think that it was my analysis that did it, because I'm the only person who's made these arguments in public about that trial having these problems. But I was not involved in the expression of concern. So this is where my bafflement is coming from. But I think, long story short, here's the thing. Reading all of that and going back into it and getting a little bit of hope, even though I shouldn't, right? Because I think by my sort of the way I process reality, these institutions are illegitimate, and what they do should not matter to me, right? Like they didn't just validate my research by retracting this paper, because like my research should not have been needed, and the retraction should have happened a lot faster. Like this doesn't, well,
this has been a long-standing complaint of mine, and a short story to sort of explain where I first was really making this point to people. You're familiar with Colin Wright, okay, friend of mine, but I first got to know him when he was, doing his postdoctorate work in Penn State. And later, after he left academia, it turns out that a few articles that he was a researcher contributing to were spearheaded by his advisor, who actually wound up being accused of and found guilty of committing massive amounts of fraud in his work. And it didn't wind up just affecting articles that or papers that Colin had participated in, but also wound up affecting a large number of other papers that Colin was not responsible for. And it turns out, as the accusation goes, that this person had a long history of fabricating data and copying and pasting data in order to massage it to get the outcomes that he wanted. Mm-hmm. And this is where I first started to really harp on the point that peer review as a process never winds up detecting fraud, never really winds up detecting these mistakes. Things wind up going to publication where there's literally nobody who has actually reviewed the paper for the things that it should be reviewed for. And you wind up having retractions like this years later, or fraud is discovered where it was like rampant and systematic. Like, you're not talking about one paper where fraud went through. You're talking about a guy who wound up building a career and becoming like he was a young guy, and he wound up becoming like this big guy in the field and winning awards and getting lots of grants to do more work because he was like making a name for himself, and of course profiting off of the fraud that he was committing. And the peer review process didn't detect a single bit of it, right? It was post publication, after it was sitting there for years, and someone was trying to use his work to do their own, and certain things that he was declaring were sort of incongruent with theirs. So they went back and actually tried to figure out how he got his answers, whereas they started to ask questions.
Yep, I believe it.
And so in a similar fashion to you, the errors that you found, some of them, they're not so sophisticated that they couldn't be caught by someone who had experience in reviewing these things, but they don't get caught. And for years, this can be published and retracted sort of in silence. No one's going to remember the retraction as much, right?
Of course not. I mean, this trial, just for people to understand, this was given the Clinical Trial of the Year award from the Society of Clinical Trials. Okay. This was not like some random, ditzy trial that happened somewhere. Like, this was like celebrated. It was covered in the Times, Vox, the Washington Post. This was the trial that was the nail in the coffin for ivermectin. Okay. And, there's so much I can say about this trial. Unfortunately, some of it I have not published yet because I just had so much, and then life took over and I hadn't gotten into it, including internal secret information that I got through a whistleblower. But what I was trying to get at is all of this has sort of rejuvenated me, whether it's justified for this to rejuvenate me or not. So I think I'm going to get back into publish the rest of the things that I have, which are honestly, a lot of it is far more damning than what I've published already. But the interesting part is that they got caught red-handed doing a thing that I was shouting from the rooftops they were doing, and really it wasn't even deniable. Look, at the end of the day, these are not about statistical likelihood of you having had contaminated data. The stuff that they were, the health nerd types were going after people for, where sort of doing like statistical analysis and like being like, well, this is likely to be fraud or whatever. It's like 1 in 10,000. No, this was like, there is no two ways about it. Like, either this was the first review, in which case it didn't reach a threshold, or it was the second, in which case you didn't have the patience. That's it. It's like a logical argument. It's not a probabilistic argument.
Don't forget, the person who levied that sort of statistical argument that something was fraudulent wound up retracting that claim, and because he didn't want to be sued.
Well, one of them. Anyway. But once again, right? I had gotten into a massive food fight on Twitter with a Vox journalist and so-called rationalist when his critique came out, and I was like, it's got all these problems. What's her name? Anyway, and she was like, no, absolutely not, whatever. And she was
is her name Kelly?
Really positive.
Kelly is the name that's coming to mind right now.
Kelsey. It's Kelsey.
Kelsey.
Okay. I don't. If I remember her last name, I would. I'm not protecting her. She doesn't deserve it. But it just doesn't. It's not occurring to me. My brain is protecting me, I think. Anyway, so we had a public fight about it, right? Well, she didn't correct the record or anything. She didn't write about when the guy was caught like making bullshit statistical so-called arguments to attack, people who had published, I don't know if he's published thousands of papers in his life. I think he has. He had tens of thousands of citations. I remember that part. Somebody who's given his life for this field, right? And you got this like whippersnapper who's not done anything going around. And fine, if you've got a good argument, you got a good argument. But like, this was not a good argument. And the whole establishment sided with him when the original claim was made, and then he was forced to retract. Honestly, I was upset that they gave him a settlement that allowed him to apologize and not go to a trial or whatever, because I thought we should have had discovery on that case. I thought we should had a deeper look into who was talking to him and whatever. But, and long story short, all I'm trying to say is, this is not your usual, finds error in trial situation where somebody does a statistical analysis and says like, well, on the basis of this and that, which looks unlikely,
improbable, therefore fraudulent. Yeah, improbable, therefore fraudulent.
Yeah, and this is not the only one I have, by the way, for this trial of this nature. The other thing with that trial that they didn't talk about, for example, let me give you one, is that the trial started on 15th of January of 2021, which you might say, like, what's the problem with 15th of January? The problem is that the official approval by the Brazilian health authority was given on the 18th. So for 3 days, they were recruiting people and giving them drugs that they were not approved to do, right? Who cares? That didn't even come up, I guess.
Well, anyway, in some places an 8 looks like a 5. So,
well, that's really the thing.
You did leave out the best part of the story with the statistical fraud settlement after defamation suit. That part, though, because the weeks preceding the suit being filed, he and Health Nerd were advertising a symposium or a class that they were going to be selling tickets for on how to detect fraud in.
How did that go?
Well, he had to back out because he got sued for that. So he wasn't the hot ticket, anymore.
You see, that's where you see people fail on messaging, because all I would have done is I would rephrase it, how to do it and how not to do it.
What I learned from my getting sued.
So that's probably wrong, but the other stuff is good.
Gonna open up to final comments if anyone wants to request to speak. I think we have time for one closing sort of article here. Alex, I'm gonna pick it here nicely. Okay, so this is slightly informative and slightly interesting. We are not going to have traces of AI dystopia. This is actually going to be a hypothetical possible prevention of AI dystopia. So someone asked me a few months ago about generative video and how realistic things are beginning to look, and asked me, what might be possible to do to sort of attempt to, prove that something was AI generated or not. And I did say that there's going to be difficulty in the sense that a lot of people will have access to models and be able to circumvent those protections, whatever protections may be invented. But I said one type of technology, older technology that comes to mind that might have an analog of use is something that people might not know. And Alex, I don't know if you know this, but did you know that for a very long time, laser printers and similar types of printer technology had hidden dots that identified the actual serial number and print, like actual printer that things were produced on, that only the government was aware of for a very long time, because they're the ones who requested that these be put inside of the printing mechanisms to try to be able to trace the origins of any documents that came up in an investigation.
I didn't know that was. I knew that there was these yellow dots in inkjet printers that were, very, very faint and very subtle, and if you didn't know you were looking for them, you wouldn't see them. That could be decoded into.
So I'll attach the link to the feed of the Wikipedia article talking about it. It's printer tracking dots. Printer tracking dots, also known as printer stenography, docucolor tracking dots, yellow dots, secret dots, or machine identification code, is a digital watermark which many color laser printers and photocopiers produce on every printed page that identifies the specific device that was used to print the document. Developed by Xerox and Canon in the mid-1980s, the existence of these tracking codes became public only in 2004. So I'll attach that Wikipedia article for those curious about that. But this is the lead in. That was my answer, was that this technology existed, so I can imagine some sort of similar idea being used. Again, when you have open models, though, the person generating it might be able to turn it off. But this could be a slight change on that, but Ars Technica, scientists hide secret codes in light to combat fake videos. It's easier than ever to manipulate video footage to deceive the viewer and increasingly difficult for fact checkers to detect such manipulations. Cornell University scientists develop a new weapon in this ongoing arms race, software that codes a watermark onto light fluctuations, which in turn can reveal when the footage has been tampered with. The researchers presented the breakthrough over the weekend at SIGG Graph 2025 in Vancouver, British Columbia, and published a scientific paper in June in the journal ACM Transactions on Graphics. Video used to treat as a source of truth. Video used to be treated as a source of truth, but that's no longer an assumption we can make, said co-author Abe Davis of Cornell University, who first conceived of the idea. Now you can pretty much create video of whatever you want. That can be fun, but also problematic because it's only getting harder to tell what's real. Per the authors, those seeking to deceive with video fakes have a fundamental advantage: equal access to authentic video footage, as well as readily available advanced low-cost editing tools that can learn quickly from massive amounts of data, rendering the fakes nearly indistinguishable from authentic video. Thus far, progress on that front has been outpaced in the development of new forensic techniques designed to combat the problem. One key feature is information asymmetry. An effective forensic technique must have information not available to the fakers that cannot be learned from publicly available training data. Granted, digital watermarking techniques exist that make good use of information asymmetry, but the authors note that most of these tools fall short in other desired attributes. Other methods may require control over the recording camera or access to the original unmanipulated video. And while a checksum, for example, can determine if a video file has been changed, it can't tell the difference between standard video compression or something malicious like inserting virtual objects. Previously, the Cornell team had figured out how to make small changes to specific pixels to tell if a video had been manipulated or created by AI, but its success depended on the creator of the video using a specific camera or AI model. Their new method, noise-coded illumination, addresses those and other shortcomings by hiding watermarks in the apparent noise of light sources. A small piece of software can do this for computer screens and certain types of room lighting, while off-the-shelf lamps can be coded via a small attached computer chip. Quote, each watermark carries a low-fidelity time-stamped version of the unmanipulated video under slightly different lighting. We call these code videos. When someone manipulates a video, the manipulated parts start to contradict what we see in the code videos, which lets us see where changes were made. And if someone tries to generate a fake video with AI, the resulting code videos just look like random variations. Because the watermark is designed to look like noise, it's difficult to detect without knowing the secret code. So that's a nice little piece of technology that might be able to be used in some cases to possibly detect fakes. I just thought that would be a nice little ending of there where we learn about printers. If you didn't know that and the government had inserted the technology or demanded that the technology be inserted for tracking purposes. Paul Ramirez, what sir have you to opine on?
Thanks. I've been listening to John Campbell, and he's been talking about a study in Florida for ivermectin that's recently, like they're funding new studies, but also he mentioned that like Fenben, I can't pronounce it. I forget the exact word.
Bendazole, I think.
Yeah, that's my question for you, Alex. Is that a psyop or is that real?
Look, I'm gonna sound like the people that I don't want to sound like, but you know, when you hear a drug doing like everything under the sun, you should get suspicious. So I've naturally stayed away from, ivermectin for cancer work, in part because of this, which is a heuristic, right? It's not really a hard rule at all. But also because usually when I get involved is when there's like hard data of like a randomized trial or whatever, where somebody's making a claim based on a closed data set. Based on what we know from A to B, right, we conclude C. And then I can sort of with confidence say that, C does not follow from A and B, right? When we're talking about like the real world and, what happened to, like a lot of what you hear in that space is anecdotes, is like, oh, I know somebody who had this and had that. And honestly, I feel like we should be listening to that a lot more. But in terms of me from over here behind my keyboard being able to make useful conclusions or useful contributions to, a lot of people saying a lot of things about a lot of people that they know, is extremely hard. Like I probably won't be very useful. So I've stayed out of it. It's an interesting thing for me, but I've not really gone into it. Because again, it doesn't seem like there's the kind of data I can bite into in there. But B, also because I don't know, man, like some of the people promoting that story are also a little bit make me uncomfortable. But that's all very like surface level stuff. I could be completely wrong.
It sounds like it's muddying the waters as to its actual benefits, at least when it comes to ivermectin side. I never heard of Fenbin until the Scott Adams. He has stage 4 prostate cancer, and he was working with Dr. Mackey from Canada, and he broke the protocol early. But he was saying that his there's a spike in he had good reason to I honestly, I'm not blaming anybody because I don't know enough, obviously, but it's hard to make sense of what's, I should say that it's a Fenbin story, not necessarily the ivermectin story, although ivermectin is somehow involved in.
I will tell you something that I did with my my special prompt that I advertised here a couple of weeks ago, which is I asked Claude, again, not vanilla Claude, which drugs that are used for animals are not being used for humans, or not being properly tested, or not being considered, even though they're being used across many species and they're like well understood to work for that condition on animals, but we're not using them for people. Okay, that was the question. And I mean, it was a depressing response because there was a lot of drugs, and maybe some of them are hallucinated. I don't know. It's a long list and somebody needs to go through it. But what shocked me is I was expecting I don't know, acne drugs, or hair pathologies, or, something superficial. It brought up a ton of cancer drugs and other stuff like that. And the story was always the same. It's generic. Nobody can justify making the expense to run the trials to have the drug succeed and be generic, and then everybody can use it over and over and over again. It's depressing because it means that we know there's enough information for us to really kind of know that it works, but we don't use it because, and in some cases the risk is very low as well. So it's not even there's nothing even much to lose. And we're just not doing it because something the FDA, something clinical trial, patients' rights, labeling requirements, whatever. And it's right there. There are probably drugs that could save many people's lives sitting in a shelf, tens of meters away from where they're sitting, and they're not taking them because, we have compartmentalized them in certain ways. The reason I'm mentioning all of this is because Fenbin is one of the ones that showed up for cancer. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, that is interesting.
And anecdotally, I've heard that a lot of people, but once again, I'm going off information from other people, like John Campbell, and he was talking about stories about other people's pets that was hey, you can either pay $16,000 for a chemo that might not work, or you can just throw these chemical, or Fenbin in them, and he's hearing a story. I mean, who knows? It might be chatbots or something, but. He's claiming that he's getting a lot of stories about pets that get Fenbin and their pets are doing better. Who knows? But also, thank you, Alex. And by the way, I think, can you go after the proximal origins story next?
I mean, I think that one's been ripped to shreds pretty conclusively. I mean, that one isn't even look. What I usually do is I reconstruct the argument they're making in my head. Okay, it seems I have a propensity for doing that. The thing with the proximal origins paper is that there is no argument. if you actually try to map it out, and people have explained this very competently, Jeffrey Sachs has explained this a lot. There is no argument that they're actually making. The entirety of their argument is, well, they couldn't have had a secret virus in their labs because we've seen everything they've published, then it's not there. And then you look at the citation they use to say we've seen everything they've published, and it's a citation from 2014. So, you know what I mean? There's not like an actual argument to be made. Like, they're not saying very much to debunk because they're not saying very much, full stop. It is, that isn't a whole other story. Anyway, so I don't know if we want to make this a COVID. This isn't podcast Gator, but I thank you for giving the floor to that particular little white whale of mine.
No, absolutely. We have one more request to speak. It looks like Donald Trump Jr. PhD, Donald J. Trump PhD. Sorry, not Junior. Let's have approved him. Hopefully his connection works. And
hey guys, what's going on? Yeah, my connection's been all over the place the last couple weeks. Sorry about that. No, I just want to say two things. One, Alex, if you've got that drug list listed somewhere or posted up, just kind of DM me or something. I'll go through it. I've got time this week. Number two, I just want to say something about, like, I don't know about the Fenben trial, but as far as ivermectin and like kind of trials, and I'm pretty sure you guys have gone through this before, there's a difference between like in vitro, in vivo, clinical trials, observational trials, and everything else. And as far as ivermectin, like, I know in 2004, when we went to the field, a lot of us used to carry thousands of doses of ivermectin because it works on parasites. But we also know that, like, we had the in vivo trials that have been going on where they put it in a petri dish basically, and we knew it was competing with dengue fever and yellow fever. And if you ever dealt with those in the field, those are insane viruses to have to deal with in austere environments. And so we use them, and it seemed to be used to good effect. Obviously, there are other things that could confound our observational data that we had in the field, including the fact that we really didn't record anything because we didn't have it. It's really hard to track patients in areas where you have no power. But my thing on that is, if just for people out there reading studies, if you're reading a study, one of the big things you want to know with, like, if they're doing the petri dish stuff is exactly how does the drug interact with the virus? What is it competing for receptor-wise, and what's the bioavailability of that drug, and how does that drug get into your system to compete with those receptors, if that makes sense?
Yep. Well, here's something funny about the Together trial in that regard. So there were those early trials in Australia that were doing the kind of thing that a lot of people do early in a pandemic. It's very reasonable, right? You basically take a whole bucket of drugs and you throw them at the virus to see if anything works. Okay. And they just, one of the things they threw at it was ivermectin. And they used a high dose because, again, when you're doing that first early stuff, you just want to see if there's any signal at all. And that's how the whole ivermectin story started. Out of this team in Monash University in Australia, Wagstaff is the name of the one researcher that was behind it. I can't remember her first name now. Anyway, but the interesting thing is that this other guy called Craig Rayner, also from Australia, showed up to debunk that, because the doses that they used were too high, and those kind of concentrations are biologically implausible in humans and whatever. Okay, which is there's problems with that argument, because there are certain things that we know ivermectin works on, that it also doesn't reach theoretically doesn't reach the concentrations required. And the answer usually is that, yes, in general, it doesn't reach the concentrations required, but at the place you need it, at the time you need it, it kind of does. But anyway, the joke is that this person, Craig Rayner, then signed up as a principal investigator at the Together trial, where they were using a dose much smaller than he said is definitely required for the drug to work. So he was basically becoming a researcher at a trial that was using a dose that he had already, submitted does not work and cannot work, right? Which I believe is a violation of many research rules, because you're not supposed to put people through medical trials if you don't believe the thing can possibly work. So that's just another really little funny story about that trial.
Okay, yeah, that's crazy. But that's the other thing too. You can also look at one of the things to do with drugs is like what they take them with. Because when they give you ivermectin on an empty stomach, it has a different. It has a different. Right, it has a different absorption pattern than if I give it with you. I want to give it with you with an oil or some kind of heavy fat. So if I make you eat an egg and give you ivermectin, I actually have a different absorption pattern than I do on an empty stomach, which is something else I don't control.
With empty stomach. And the thing is, we know this from Merck's own insert, that it leads to a 2.5, I believe, times boost in concentration in the blood if you take it with a fatty meal.
Yep, exactly, because it absorbs out to the small intestine.
Yeah, but this is not me saying it. Like I'm telling you, the FDA insert that Merck put in their drug said, this is what we think it does.
When when you repeat what other people say, Alex, it becomes less authoritative. So you have to understand,
right.
It's no longer true when you say it.
It's more true when I say it because Merck lied.
Right. Anyway. But that's the crazy part. Like if I'd gone to a doctor in 2006, right, and I go, hey, I have an outbreak of dengue fever where I am at this moment, and he asked me what I was giving him, I'd be like, I don't know, I'm giving him Tylenol and ivermectin with a shot of olive oil or whatever oil I could, or canola oil, whatever kind of oil I could get. They wouldn't have looked at me twice, They'd have said, do what you got to do. That's a fine experimental use of a drug that has a low downside. And for some reason, they lost their mind. It's horse-based dewormer in 2021.
You just remind me of something that I find very amusing. So there is this website, Gator, you probably have seen it, called IVM Meta. Have you seen it?
I've seen it, but I wasn't something I regularly went to.
No. Anyway, but they've done a pretty good job, like gathering all these studies, and they kind of call themselves like a kind of a living meta-analysis. Right. And a lot of people in the health nerd sort of orbit will say like, oh, they're not sort of reputable, and they're doing whatever they want. And their methodology leads to only positive results being accumulated because look at all these drugs that they're testing and they're looking positive on all of them or whatever, something like that. And the question is, all of them? No, not all of them. There were some drugs that they did the same exact thing that they're doing on all the drugs that have the same protocol for everything, which is actually a very credible step in my book. One drug that that actually made things worse on COVID? You guessed it, Tylenol.
I think I'm going to say remdesivir.
No, well, yes, that too. That was, I think, in the negatives too. But Tylenol is the funny one because
so I killed my patients.
Yeah, pretty much. Sorry. We're not sure yet. Did they come out really good in coding on the other side of that?
I don't know. I guess I'll have to look at the codes I wrote down in a notebook paper that's about 20 years old right now.
Yes. Anyway, I'll look, DM me on that if I forget, or just badger me on Twitter. I will try to send you that list.
Paul Ramirez, go ahead and what
I'm just curious, before I ask, I can wait until next time, but are you guys trying to get out, or because there's a slight topic change?
Well, we might have time for we'll let you know if we have time to if you're going to do a subject change. We are closing out. We're a little over our runtime, but let's put a
5-minute cap, and if we can do it in 5, we'll do it. Otherwise, we transfer.
So in a recent podcast with Brett Weinstein and Heather, they mentioned the Midwest doctor and particularly about DMSO. And that's also something obviously I'm just a layman on a couch, with a literal armchair, and I'm trying to figure out what's real or not. And I don't think this is a topic I can bring up with my doctor because my doctor still thinks I should get my COVID flu shot. Do you know much about that, the DMSO at all?
Yes, and I've looked into that, and I used my forbidden prompt, which I urge you to go use for these reasons. This is what it's made for. Go on Claude if you have it, and put it in and ask it about DMSO. And the thing about DMSO is that it's one of those, right? It is routinely given to animals for pain all the time. It's like it's standard. So if you ask an LLM about DMSO, it's not going to tell you it doesn't work. It's going to start talking about how, well, it's a solvent. And the problem with it being a solvent is that it can carry contaminants from the skin into your bloodstream. And we don't know what that does, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But there's ways to cover that problem. And we give it to, did I mention we give it to animals all the time? And it seems to work really well. So, again, it won't deny, unlike ivermectin for COVID, which, it'll go the whole, misinformation, disinformation route. If you ask it about DMSO, it's not going to deny that it works because I think it's understood that it does. It's just that there's reasons that we don't use it. But somehow those reasons don't apply to animals.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's all I had. And is there any reason why I would use it, even if I don't have any health issues? Is there any benefit? So is it just purely meant for treating specific illnesses, or is there a reason why it might try?
Right. If you're dating a girl that really likes people smelling like garlic, and you've run out of garlic, but you do have a bottle of DMSO, that would totally do the trick. I don't know if that covers you.
Good dating advice, Alex.
Thank you. I don't know. I don't know about general health benefits. In general, look, I treat everything skeptically, perhaps more than I should. There may or may not be some DMSO in my house, but I haven't used it. And I'm not, unlike other things, again, if you actually inquire as to the actual state of the evidence and knowledge about that particular molecule, it isn't that it doesn't work. It is that there were concerns that led to it being phased out. And those concerns usually rhyme with generic, but we're not going to say that.
So you got your topic in there, Paul. Good job. 5 minutes. That worked. All right, Alex, thank you for another great episode of This Dumb Week. I'm gonna try to force you to listen to the beginning that you lost when you dropped off, because there was a good bit of humor involved in that story. I think that will probably make you laugh pretty hard. Everyone, thank you for listening. This will be up in the next couple of hours on every podcast platform that you might frequent. And Alex, I think before, when you had the technical problem, you missed my news that we are up to 18 reviews now on Spotify, still at a 5-star rating. Thank you, everyone. We're on our way to beating Chelsea Clinton and her podcast.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Take care.